Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Signs and Shadows. We are here with our first show. We've got brother Abu Salahuddin and brother Farouk McDermott. Assalamu alaikum, guys. How are you guys doing?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, good, mashallah, just getting by in this hot weather. So just taking it nice and easy. Thankfully, I'm in what I call the fortress of knowledge in my basement with my many books. So I'm a very happy guy at the moment.
MashaAllah,
Alhamdulillah.
tabarakallah.
Mashallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for inviting me on to join both of you today. Alhamdulillah. A real privilege. Allahu Akbar with alhamd. And yeah, I'm excited for this to be the first of many, inshallah ta'ala, where we can really dive into it and get everybody involved. That's what I hope this one can be, right? We get a lot of people involved, see where we end up.
Yeah. Inshallah, bro. That's the plan. Also to answer questions, because obviously we've done several podcasts and spaces and posts and articles and stuff like this, and there's loads of questions. I try to answer as many as I can in the comment section, but obviously it's not comprehensive. So it's an opportunity for the guys following the content and everything we're putting out to ask their questions as well. So guys, everyone watching, I'm going to share with you the join link so you guys can come on and join us live and ask your questions. All I'm going to ask you to do, if you're joining us live, when you're in the backstage, I'm going to ask you to switch your camera on for a second, just so I know it's a real person and not someone trying to mess around and stuff like that, because that happens sometimes as well in these spaces. Yeah, we want it to be a productive discussion. Walaikum salam to everyone. So we've got some brothers and sisters joining already, alhamdulillah. Also, another little note, if the stream while you're watching it live seems a bit laggy at times, forgive us for that. The signal is up and down these days, but once it's uploaded, it should be much better, inshallah, afterwards, right? So Q&A with you guys, whatever you guys want to ask related to these topics. Abu Salahuddin say, Farouk say, mashallah, both specialists in their own regards. They'll be more than happy to engage your questions, inshallah. But before or while we wait for everyone to join, let's start with the first part of the show, which is current events. Okay, so what's been happening in the UFO world? Anything you guys want to, let's start with maybe Abu Salahuddin, as you're the closest to me on the right. Anything that you've noticed, anything you've picked up on, anything you want to share with us this week?
Yeah, I find interesting the whole kind of like little spat going on between Lou Elizondo and Ross Coulthard. And I was watching another guy, I can't remember who his name, and this kind of like when kind of like sometimes you get into friendly discussions with brothers and sisters about different aspects of Islamic law, and it can get kind of heated. This is nothing compared to what's going on in the UAP NHI movement. And it's like, I was watching this one guy and he's talking about like online trolls and people essentially being sent out to beat people, intimidate people. It's like, it's crazy. But one of the things that, and I've kind of mentioned this to the both of you, we've kind of spoke about it privately and we've mentioned it as well. I think it just kind of shows that there is what I call a gatekeeper system going on here, that there are certain individuals that come out as the I don't know, the UAP savior, messiah, to bring all the information and say, here's the disclosure, I know, I saw it, I witnessed it. And then you find that, hold up a second, it seems as though actually you're part of the system. I'm reminded, from the Matrix films, when Neo finds out that the whole system of the Matrix, whether that is the Oracle or the Architect, is all part of the same system. And I think what really brought it home to me is the struggle that you two brothers have had to get out the Jinn hypothesis, to speak to people, to engage with people. It's kind of like the door's open and then the door's very quickly thrown back in your face. So that makes me very suspicious that, okay, if we're here about looking for the truth of this phenomena, wouldn't you be open to different aspects, different understandings to find that ultimate truth? But it seems to me the truth is very subjective to a lot of people, and it depends whether or not it comes with a government seal on it. So but that's what I find really the most interesting going on at the moment.
Yeah, the Coulthard and the Elizondo thing has been going back and forth. Farouk, have you seen anything? I know you've spoken to, well, I don't know if it's already made my first mistake. Probably I don't know if I was supposed to mention this publicly, but you've had some sort of correspondence with Cult Heart.
Before, yeah.
And what's your thoughts on the Elizondo Cult Heart spat that's taking place currently online?
I think that we're seeing, like, we're doing this fi sabilillah. There's no money to be made from talking about this topic from our side of things. It's a passion project for us, right? It's not a charitable endeavor. It's not a business, or, you know, for someone like Coulthard, this is his career, and he wants to be a journalist who's remembered for the work that he does, right? And it's way beyond the business thing. This is like, he staked everything on this being the case, that disclosure is going to happen soon, right? So somebody like Ross, who's been, for want of a better description, twiddling his thumbs for a good half a year now, yeah, there's been some big stories broken, but it's more whistleblower or witness statements coming out. But really, for this to have that career-defining moment for somebody like Coulthard, he needs to have this stamp of approval, as you mentioned, Abu Salahuddin, from the government. He needs that of authenticity stamp, yeah? Because a guy coming out of a 30-year career in intelligence, yeah, telling you that I worked on secret programs that I can't tell you the details of, is one thing, but having an actual disclosure effort from a current serving a person from the administration of the American government, preferably from the executive branch, is something completely different. And that would be something great for his career. What he sees in Lou Elizondo is someone who's not, and I'm not saying this is his only motivation, but part of the motivation is that, like, I've been pushing for disclosure for so long now, Coulthard, and I've got a lot of these guys behind the scenes who are telling me these things, and they've told me that Lou was part of it and going way back, and as part of the legacy program, and he's not being forthcoming with it like some of the other guys, like a David Grush, for example. And it could be that this information came from Grush. Grush may have said that, look, when I was, you know, working for the UAP task force under James Lukatsky and those guys, the UAP task force, I was given the responsibility to dig into this. But who was running point on intelligence? It was Lou Elizondo, counterintelligence specifically as well. It was Lou Elizondo. So the role that Lou Elizondo played, you know, what subsequently why he came forward, and that's something else. But I think someone like Coulthard is fed up. He wants to get the juice out. He wants somebody big who can really break the dam and have the water spill out further to justify this career choice that he's made. Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing, but that's what's on the line here for somebody like a Coulthard. This, like, for us to do this once a month, it's difficult. You know, for him, he's got a lot of time on his hands, so he's constantly pumping out content, and he's got to keep it fresh. And something like this freshens it up, brings the eyes onto it. I do think that this is a move by Coulthard to put pressure on Lou Elizondo, and also to further push the disclosure efforts, and also to, you know, get some eyes on what Coulthard's doing, because it was steamrolling for a time. Now the ball is slowing down. It's getting to the end of the sort of curve of the mountain. Yeah, the snowball is. So he wants to get some momentum going again. And personally, I don't blame him. But obviously, he's just hinted at something. I don't think he's really said anything substantial. Coulthard. He's just said, well, you know, he was part of the legacy program, allegedly, according to my sources. You know, and which Lou, obviously, he can't say yes or no to that because he has restrictions. So personally, I think he probably was. And from some of the, like, you know, you read his book, Imran, you've probably gone through it as well, Abu Salahuddin. I forgot the name of his book. We both Imminent, right? We both went through that book. And in that book, he does say some crazy things that make you think that his connection to the program it goes way beyond what he was doing, because his career is kind of like, he touches a little bit and then he just goes to when he worked on disclosure efforts. It doesn't really tell you what led to where he was, you know. So yeah,
you know, it's funny.
Don't forget as well, just to add into that from what Brother Farouk is saying. Remember, he never would have got that book published if he was really revealing the secrets of the secrets.
Yeah.
It goes through the Department of Defense. It goes through all of these, you know, the political structure of America, the legalese. Okay, you can mention this, you can't mention that. If he was really revealing anything groundbreaking that, you know, like you say, would be, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back, it never would have got published in the first place. So obviously there's a lot of stuff that probably he isn't talking about, but yeah, it's there in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, everything is sanctioned by the government. It's not like it's not like a actual whistleblower who's going against the grain and what he's allowed to say. And say. All of these guys are saying exactly what they're allowed to say.
Yeah.
And that's interesting in and of itself. There's a question on the screen. I want to get both of you guys' take on this. It's by Freaky Jason. I think that, yeah, Freaky_Jason. He says, what do you guys think? What do you guys see coming in the near future regarding this whole UAP thing? Who wants to take that first?
Brother Farouk, you go.
Yeah, go on. So I think entertainment first. I think what we're going to see is a pivot into more entertainment, more videos, more TV shows, more Hollywood stuff coming forward. I think that's very near term. Yeah, we've already seen it with that Steven Spielberg movie. I think we're also going to see some more really what's the right word? Some garden variety news bulletins on UAP and UFOs. Definitely more coming from the what's the right word? From the more intelligence / military side of things. They're not going to be so dramatic as like the previously. If you had somebody talking about UFOs on your show, it was generally someone who had a very bizarre experience coming on to share that. Yeah, like a cosmic type visitors from outer space speak to me through my brain and beam me up to Venus. That's going to that's not going to be taken front and center. We're going to see more of this what's the right word? Like militarized things. That's near term. That's my view. Near term UAP, we're going to see more news and we're going to see more entertainment shows talking of that side of things, like that Steven Spielberg movie, Disclosure Day. Yeah, I think midterm, it all depends on how this battle phases comes out. With anyone who's following this topic knows for sure something is being hustled over. There is a tug of war happening, and underlying all of it is the argument that it's going to be globally destabilizing. If UAP disclosure happens and the true nature of what these craft are capable of is disclosed to the public, and the types of propulsion systems that these things purport to have, it is destabilizing. And I think that is the main argument. It's like, guys, do you want to create global turmoil just because you want everyone to know that these things are real? Or is it better to take our time with this and have a very, very, very slow disclosure and bring up the infrastructure and other aspects of normal human civilian life before we make disclosure? And that's what I think is going to be decided midterm. So in the next 10, 15 years, we're going to have a decision made on how they're going to go for it. Then you've got this wild group who are saying that they're going to do, what is it? Uncontrolled disclosure, where it's just everything gets dumped on the internet or something like that, and it causes chaos. So that's what I think was happening near to midterm. Long term, definitely disclosure will happen. I think long term, because and this is from a religious perspective now, I'm just going to put my Islamic hat on, and I'm going to say that without a doubt, toward the end of times, it becomes very strange. And the people will be confused about what reality is and the nature of reality and the nature of the human being. And I think that's going to be brought into the discussion. Where do we come from? What are we? And the UAP, the pilots of these craft will be front and center in that discussion. What is the origin of man? That's long term. So I'd say long term, it's going to be very it's going to be disclosed, and it's going to create these questions, about the origins of man, where we come from, and the nature of reality. Midterm, we're going to have a decision made on how disclosure will be done, and I think short term, we're going to definitely see more engagement from news and from entertainment media. Sorry, it may be a long-winded answer, but
no, it's good. This is what the live's for, bro. To go into depth and share thoughts and really get into the splitting the hairs and stuff. Over to you, Abu Saladin. Over to you, bro, and then we'll get on with it.
I think Brother Fruit kind of summed up a lot of it. I don't think we're going to get the smoking gun video footage. We're not going to get I've seen stuff posted online that's better than what the Americans are releasing. So if you're telling me that Joe Blogs down the street can get better footage, then we know that stuff exists. So if it's not being released, there's a reason it's not being released. And I think it's kind of like the slow drip feed. It's enough to keep you going. It's enough to keep inquiring minds satisfied the taste of, oh, we want to know a little bit more about this. I think maybe longer term down the line, I think you might see, and this is something that I'm surprised at, and it's just having this conversation I remember. I'm surprised they're not kind of bringing the idea of the extraterrestrial creation of humanity, like they start bringing it in maybe within the schooling system. Because I remember very, very vividly back in 1983, 4, when I was at secondary school, we did a whole semester looking at the origins of man, and we went through apes, the ancient astronaut theory, and God. And that was in 1983, 84.
Wow.
We did that. I'm surprised it hasn't kind of more appeared within the educational curriculum. And I think that's something, I think you will begin to see a societal change when it starts getting introduced into the education system, where what was fringe, i.e. Eric von Daniken, Zachariah Stitchian, when you start being taught in the education system and it kind of becomes reflective of what's being released in society, then you might have, maybe they're looking at it as a generational thing. So they're looking at it within the next 10 to 15 years, you'll have more of a generation that are accustomed to the potential idea that we wasn't created by God, that there wasn't evolution in the sake of one-celled to a two-celled to an ape to a human, but rather genetic engineering took place of the human species producing, modern Homo sapien today. So I think there is a very long-term agenda going on, and I think they will continue with the slow drip feed. But I think, as Brother Farouk said, I think we're maybe looking another 15 to 20 years before we maybe start getting that real smoking gun. This is the footage, and by the way, here are the entities associated with the footage.
Can I just add something quickly to it as well?
Yeah, go
ahead.
If
you look at the people who are given these privileged positions within the new sort of UAP task force that Trump's putting together, you've just had, what was his name? Avi Loeb, that's it. Avi Loeb's just been announced as one of the key figures that's going to be working on the UAP topic. These are all legacy guys. These are people who were older. That generation that's been controlling it for the last, say, 30 years, when they were young, made their career in the 70s and the 80s, these guys are still around. And they don't want to hand it over. I think they become enthralled by it. And I think in their mind, it's too dangerous to hand over to the next generation yet. So they're tooth and nail. And there's probably factions, guys. There's probably groups who are very anti-handing it to the next generation because they can't be trusted. So they're going to make very, odd laws to who could be recruited and for what reason. And because of the paranoia that comes with it, anybody who's joining the team now, definitely after a Grush and after Elizondo and after this modern sort of recent UFO disclosure effort, I think it's even more like what's the right word? paranoid, where they, you know, like, not stovepiping. What's it where you constantly look at what everyone's doing, like the invasive security measures, where your phone is monitored, where your home is monitored constantly. You're under complete surveillance at all times, which
totalitarianism.
Yeah, totalitarianism, where everything's monitored. They've got control of everything you do, and if you've got a good enough mind to get in the project, if your personality ain't there and like you're too much of a maverick, they're not going to recruit you. They want people who look at James Zakatsky. He's prime example. The guy is an absolute. His legacy. He's definitely part of the old school team. He clearly, in some aspects, is pro disclosure, but he's using the system, as you said, Abu Salahuddin. He's going through the system. He's getting everything he writes put through the system, whatever he's allowed to speak about. But he's doing it by the book. But he's saying there's loads more I want to tell you guys, but you know, I don't want to have catastrophic disclosure. I'm following the system. And he's hoping that the system will change and allow more things to be said. So that generation's who's got it. It's our guys who's you know, maybe a little bit younger than them. That generation just underneath, they're being starved, I think. And the ones who are expecting to be handed the portfolio now are probably getting, you know, ants in their pants, itchy feet, and like, you know, what's going on? And everybody's just buckled down, tightened all the bolts, and this thing, you know, I think it's like right now it's in survival mode, isn't it? You know, it's tucked in, the whole program's tucked down, it's in lockdown mode. And I think that's why, as we say, you know, 20 years I think before we can make moves, because it's too dangerous right now for the project is under the most pressure perhaps ever in its history. So I don't see it anytime soon.
What's really interesting is it seems like this whole topic is functioning on several different levels. So there's the level of disclosure amongst the government and all of the ins and outs of it, and the quote unquote whistleblowers, the scientists on the program, all of this type of stuff, the reverse engineering, all of that. And then there's a long game. But it seems like I agree. I think it's going to be at least, you never know, another 2 decades before that progresses to a significant level. But in the meantime, just this whole process of drip feeding, that in itself is a type of social engineering that's taking place.
Yep.
They're preparing people's minds to receive, the way I see it now, to receive what we would call the Dajjal at some stage. And the reason I say that is because when you look at what's happening, you prior to 2017, you know, about 10 years ago, a lot of people were down the road, going down the road of naturalism, materialism, atheism. They wanted nothing to do with the so non-physical, the spiritual, the otherworldly. Now there's been a great shift. It's like people, the very same people that were atheists, naturalist atheists back then, are now more spiritually leaning atheists. So it's almost like a type of engineering that's taking place where people's minds are being prepared to accept something outside of themselves, which is higher, that they would submit to. We're seeing it in the AI sphere. Even the whole AI technology, people are submitting to this tech. There's academic papers been written on this now. Even within the whole UFO NHI sphere, we're seeing the same thing. This whole myth of, you know, these greater entities that are spiritually more developed, they're technologically more developed, and they're here to help us and save us. And people are now, you see amongst the small cults like Bledsoe, Stephen Gray, their cults, their followers are starting to submit to and worship these entities and beings. So the way I see it, it's almost like a, how would you say, you know, when you pre-test something, it's like a beta test, right? It's almost preparing the people. Okay, if they're willing to accept and worship these entities, and they have now the psychological disposition and the framework to do that, well, okay, in the future, we know they'll submit to another creature or a being that emerges, right? So it's almost testing the grounds and also preparing the people in the process as well. But yeah, there's another comment on the screen by, I don't know how to say the name. Can someone, 2180, let's just say.
By Reseg.
Yeah, I don't know.
2180.
My dyslexia doesn't allow me to read these names properly, but absolutely, he's saying absolutely they keep Islam away from the West, so we don't have this info to make sense of it, basically, make it make sense.
I think
Anything?
that's
Any thoughts on that, guys?
yeah, I think that's a fair comment. You got to remember this is the intelligence community who have got all pretty much the vast majority of their funding over the last 30 years to battle against Islam. So they've even research papers, they've done doctorates, probably specific, very niche research on how to deal with Islam that will never see the light of day. And they've funded that over the last 30, 40 years, how to understand the mind of a Muslim, how to re-engineer the Islamic mind. You had that civil democratic Islam, that the Rand Corporation report from back in the early 2000s. I think the actual research was done slightly before that, but all of that shows that they've had a very in-depth reading of Islam and research into Islam and into Muslims, and in particular into types of Muslims who they would classify as extremist Muslims, people who don't think that anybody else should have a choice in what law they follow except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's law. So say, for example, in Iraq or in a Muslim country, they would say that, if there's a group who don't want to follow the laws of that country, in the West, you should allow them to not follow those laws. It should be optional. So they want to have non-Sharia options, right? This is what they've literally said. So from such an organization as RAND, who has going all the way back to the 60s, brothers, a deep interest in the UFO topic, a think tank like the Rand Corporation most certainly knows the in-depth scale of what Islam has to say about the UFOs and Jinn, and in particular the creature and the deep history it has with mankind. So they don't want that coming out, because it kind of having an air of mystery benefits the program. Keeping things and allowing people to pontificate on what it might be keeps it safe. Could be this, yeah, you're right, and spreading little bits of information. It might be this, and have people come out and tell people that it's that, and we've got a very specific piece of knowledge about this particular program, whether it be the psionics or otherwise. So it gets people excited, and they go into these deep rabbit holes of trying to figure out what it might be, to waste time, when in reality it quite often, brothers, it's quite simple. The topic itself, it's just this mystery breeds a lot of in-depth and convoluted theories that don't need to be there. And Islam has a very simple, it is a detailed theory, but nonetheless simple to follow. It's not overly convoluted like the program is, because the program is in survival, right? It wants to survive, it wants to stay out of the minds and the eyes of the people. It doesn't want to be brought to light. It wants to live in the darkness. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with the comment. They want to keep us away from, and I would even push as well, they don't want the Christians talking about it. They don't, because they don't want an answer to it. They want it to be a new thing so they can redevelop how the human mind adapts to this newfound discovery. It's nothing new. It's not a thing that's just started visiting us last week. It's ancient. The human beings knew about them, and that's really something which I think you could say Islam. They don't want Islam to, but also Christianity and the monotheistic beliefs that we share with them, inshallah.
Inshallah. Brothers and sisters, before we carry on, we've got about 80 of you watching right now live. Please share this so other people can, inshallah, benefit from this as well and ask their questions. And also, I know there's loads of questions coming through, so we're working our way through. We'll make sure we get to your question. No one's question, inshallah, is going to be missed unless it's like a absolutely ridiculous, crazy question that is deliberately put there to.
What did it say? I didn't see it, bro.
No, I'm not saying there is one yet, but I'm it can happen. I'm just saying, but we will get through everyone's questions. So there's a question. I think it's a question or a statement on the screen. Salam to all, knowing the Jinn nations existed before mankind on Earth. The only conclusion is the human higher ups have been working with them. So I know this is a topic, mashallah, both of you have probably a lot to say, but let's try to keep it a little bit,
sure,
concise, because I know there's a lot that could be said on this. So let's go to Abu Salah first, and then to Farouk, inshallah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm reminded of a line that introduces the first Lord of the Rings film. history became legend, legend became myth. And it's really interesting. When I was looking up the kind of the exegesis of Surah Jinn in the Quran, it mentions something very interesting about that initial relationship between like the early children of Adam and Hawa, Adam and Eve, may God be pleased with them, that the Jinn initially had a kind of a fearful aspect of humans. So in a lot of ways, the way that the relationship we have now with the Jinn, it's like a bit mysterious, a bit fearful. Oh, you know, what can they do? The Jinn had the same relationship with us when apparently we first came on the earth. They were very fearful of us. They didn't know what we could do, and they stayed away from humanity. But then when they kind of began to understand that they had physical capabilities and abilities that we didn't have, that maybe would seem to supersede us as human beings, then they became a little bit more adventurous. And then I think studying the historical record, there seems to be a whole vast aspect of human history where humanity was worshipping the gods, or what they would see the gods, which were actually the Jinn. What I found is one of the most interesting aspects, and it kind of links in with something you was talking about in the week, Brother Imran, and that is the Neolithic age. Really seems to have been a real milestone for the Jinn, where I would say there was a mass global worship of them as deities. You spoke about a couple of days ago about kind of the Hermetic secret language that these UAPs were forming and taking on, what it meant in esoteric groups. And then I did a little bit more background history, and we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, about what are called the Neolithic stone spheres that are from around about 3000 BC. They only seem to appear in Scotland, but these stone spheres, if you look at them, they really do seem to be depictions of a lot of the orbs when they appear. So the form, the geometric designs and everything. So you're talking about, at least from the Neolithic age onwards, there was a mass worship of the Jinn. And that just kind of then carried on into the establishment of the first real civilizations and societies. So you have the Sumerian civilization, of which Ibrahim alayhi was part of. And we know from the Quran that the dialogue that he had with his father and with the society, you know, and then you have from there that a lot of the historians have said how the Sumerians, yeah, mashallah, yeah, these are the stone spheres we're talking about. A lot of them are matching in with the geometric forms of a lot of these UAPs. You spoke about it earlier this week, whether that is tetrahedrons, octahedrons, and so forth. And then there was like really the influence of the Sumerians on the Egyptians. And that really seemed the Egyptians. I put a comment on X this week, and I said, I think when we're talking about the Egyptians, we need to start calling them the Empire of the Jinn, because that's essentially what they were, an empire of the Jinn. And then through like the revelation from God to Moses, peace be upon him, to Jesus, and to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that was the push back and was the putting in place. But now it's kind of like with spirituality, faith kind of disappearing from the modern mind, is like now they're kind of creeping through the cracks. And now the way they're doing it is through, we are now the NHI, we're coming back to the earth. Your ancestors used to worship us. And look at all the nice things and the great empires you established and the secret Hermetic, you know, life that we can give you. And that's what it is. It's basically then creeping back into the world again. So the Jinn, up until today, they continue to influence behind the scenes. Absolutely. We know things like Bohemian Grove in America, where they sacrifice, you know, artificial, they call it, was it the cremation of care, which is the burning of an effigy. Even this week here in the UK, there was a case, ongoing investigation that of, you know, someone that was sadly unalived during the summer solstice. Go back to the Neolithic period, that was happening quite frequently, that the ancient Britons, the Europeans, were sacrificing people to these gods of theirs. And so they are there, they've always been there, but now they're just re-establishing themselves. That's what it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the book, Lynn Picknett's book that you recommended, on the second chapter, they go into the whole attempt to revive Hermeticism in the Renaissance period and how that failed. And then immediately after, the Rosicrucian movement and the Freemasonry all started. So the link to the UFOs is very interesting there. Farouk, let's go to you. But just before we go to you on that question, bro, we have Muhammad that's joined in the backstage. Bro, if you can just switch your camera on in backstage for me. And then I will bring you on as soon as Farouk finishes answering the question as well.
Okay, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I just want to quickly read a small hadith that ties directly in. First, I'll start with an ayah of Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Day of Judgment. And this talks about what, mashallah, Brother Abu Salahuddin talked about, as well as the question or the statement that the brother made, yeah? Allah said that on that day, He will gather them together, the meaning the Jinn, and He would tell them, "Oh, people of the Jinn, indeed you misled many of mankind." And their allies among mankind will say, some of us have made use of others, and we have now reached the term that you have appointed for us. Allah exposes this relationship on the Day of Judgment. But that relationship is one of evil. And it is known to the people, the evildoers who push this satanic ideology. It's known that they're selling their souls and they're not going to get a share of al-akhirah. It's known that that's what they're going to do. Briefly, we'll go through this hadith and then we'll go to the brother who's waiting in the back. In Imam Muslim, and it's Sahih, he narrated from Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anh, that the Prophet ﷺ said that Iblis sets up his throne on water. Then he sends out his raiding parties, and the closest to him of these troops are the ones who cause the most tribulation, the most fitna, the most tribulation, the most evil, the most harm to the human beings. The closest to him of those troops are the one who cause the most harm. Yeah, one of them will come. So one of these. So just, I want you to paint this in your mind, please, everyone who's listening, that Iblis has a throne. And the description of the throne here, the word, don't imagine a chair from which I'm sitting like this, or an elaborate throne of a king or a queen. This is something much more different. The throne of Iblis, you can imagine it like a platform. And it's where he has his delegation and his deliberation, where he gives out his commands. So it's like a command post. And this, he places it on water. It's not always there, but he will place it on the water, and Iblis sets up his throne. That's what it says, it sets up. He makes preparations and puts the throne above water. Then he sends out these raiding parties. So I want you to imagine, this is like a military operation. He places the throne over the water. He places this platform over water. Then he sets it up so that it's able to send out his delegation, his parties, his troops, and they go out. And the best of them are the ones who cause the most harm. Then one of these troops will come back to him, and he will say to Iblis, he'll say, "Oh, Iblis, I've done such and such. I've done something." And he, the shaitan, says, Iblis will say, "You have not done much." He said, maybe he said, "I caused somebody to steal a packet of crisps," or "I caused this person to shout and be rude and use swear words." Iblis says, "This is nothing." Then another one will come. Another one of these troops will return back to Iblis, and he will say, "I never left him. He came to a human being. I went to this human being, and I didn't leave him until I created troubles and caused division between him and his wife." How long are these troops sent out for? Days, weeks, months, years. Years, brothers and sisters. Years, my fellow brothers and sisters of humanity. You can have something in your home affecting your life for years to cause evil in your house, to cause discombobulation, to cause crimination, deliberately having these thoughts and feelings and antagonistic personalities that have been nurtured in you deliberately. And then he comes close to him, Iblis. He brings this one close and he says, "How good you are." He gets praised and he gets thanked. This is a job for them. And among the parties of Iblis, of a shaitan, of the devil, and we're not talking about Hollywood horned creature. It could be the most handsome man you've ever seen. We're talking about an individual who wants to sow discord, and from his soldiers are human beings included. Okay. The last thing I want to mention, and that's about the human beings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, he says, and this is from chapter 17, verse 64, Allah says, and befall them gradually, those of whom you can among them with your voice. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed for a shaitan to do, to use the voice, to make songs, and to call to the disobedience of Allah, and make assaults on them with your cavalry and your infantry. The Shaykh here, he says, he has troops which launch attacks, riding and on foot, whom he sends against people to provoke them to do evil. When we went to warfare in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when the human beings were fighting, we used to take what? Horses or camels, or if you were in certain parts of the world, elephants. And in the modern times, we don't use these things as much anymore. We use modern technology. And same thing among the Jinn. They will use their version of their modern technology in their time. So this is how we can identify that they use all means and ways in which to cause and sow discord among humanity. But one of the key things Allah mentioned here is to use the voice. And music and the sinful behavior from music has gone in an increase over the last 100 years. Slowly but surely, now it's almost pure pornographic. Disgusting things. People talking about, how horny they are constantly in music, and what they do to women and what the women do to men. It's just pure filth. And it is to disrupt humanity and to cause these issues, these social issues we see among our children and even among adults, man. The adults aren't free from it, 40, 50-year-old men and women are destroying their families because they feel like they've become handsome or beautiful and they're getting a lot of attention online. Why? Because of the nature of how music has gone. It values beautification and sexual provocation. And now this is what everybody values. If you've got there's a guy, bro, I'm not joking, he smashes his jaw to make his jaw look more handsome. There's some lunatic, some young guy.
A real phenomena. Chef Fahd was saying that day, there's a whole trend now that's picked up on TikTok where guys, it's called something, I don't know, maybe someone could tell us in the comments. They literally are tapping their jaws.
He's smashing his jaw, bro.
To get the chiseled look.
To get the chiseled look.
What's going on, man?
It's insane, brother. So yeah, I could go on and on. I don't want to keep going, but may Allah bless you, akhi.
I mean, okay, let's go to Brother Muhammad. Brother Muhammad, you can unmute yourself. You can turn on your camera if you like, or you keep it off. It's your choice. And fire away with your question.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you guys doing? Can I add like a point to what the Shaykh were saying? I guess this whole thing about jinns, black magic, aliens, and this sort of stuff, this is a untapped territory for da'wah, because a lot of non-Muslims, they are interested in these topics, and some of them might actually be experiencing stuff with jinn and black magic, although they might not know that they're experiencing this, and they would be in kind of a dilemma where they might not believe in a god, but at the same time not be able to explain what they're experiencing. So Jazakallah khair, first of all, for all your efforts in this field, because this is like I said, untapped territory for in terms of da'wah. And I think even for Muslims, because a lot of Muslims, be it in the West or be it in Muslim countries, they have been influenced by the media, where they have a really skewed understanding about the unseen world. You'd be surprised if you go to Muslim countries. You'd be surprised to see how many people believe that the jinn or shayateen are dead people who come back to life. Again, because of media influence and so on. It's beneficial to both, I think. As for the question, my question would be, in Surah Al-An'am, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا إِلَى آخِرِ الْآيَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Yuhi ba'duhum ila ba'din zukhruf al-qawli ghurura." So, can we infer from the ayah that this is talking about the shayateen conversing with the elite of the people or the governments that we have now as well, and kind of giving them strategies to deceive the people?
Yeah.
Can this be like a tafsir of it? Because I have not read anything to this understanding.
So
what was it? Can you just tell us the chapter and verse number, please, bro? Is all, inshallah.
Yeah, so it's Surah Al-An'am, which
yeah, Surah Al-An'am,
Surah 6 and verse number 142.
Okay, Bismillah.
Yeah, go, carry on, guys. Bismillah. You guys go ahead, inshallah.
Let me just pull it up. I read this many times. This ayah. Are you sure? Qawli qurura, yeah? No, this not ayah number 142.
Sorry, I'm mistaken. It's it's 112, sorry.
112, yeah. Subhanallah. So La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Let me just pull up. There's a great tafsir online, and it's called Al-Alim. Tafsir. I'll put it up, brother. But I've read this ayah many times. It's very beneficial for, the whole of Surah An'am is super beneficial for this topic. So read Surah An'am if you're interested in the jinn and the unusual stories as well, inshallah. But I will bring it up. I don't want to speak from ignorance, akhi, so I will bring it up, inshallah. And we'll go to.
Sorry to interject, but like one of the benefits we can take from Surah Al-An'am as a whole as well is that it gives you like the weird practices that the pagans used to have, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how shaitan deluded them. And if we take parallels to our society, like the brother was mentioning, people beating up their own faces to look a certain way, shaitan has deluded them to do like things which should not make sense to a sound mind. So this is another benefit perhaps you can take from Surah Al-An'am.
No, bless you. You're 100% right, brother. The ayat preceding the ayah you mentioned from, I think it's around 110 or 109. It talks about Iman, and it talks about belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it talks about how people who are ignorant and who are arrogant, who want to see a sign. And part of these sort of confusing things to do with jinn and things like this, people used them in the olden days. They used to think that, the Prophet was possessed by jinn, possessed by shaitan. They used to use this supernatural thing that even the modern atheists would reject as a reason not to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this is neither here nor there. I just want to mention it. So this ayah, the brother mentioned, is, and so we have appointed for every prophet enemies, shayateen, among mankind and jinn, inspiring one another with adorned speech. We talked about this, Imran, because in another ayah, he says that they inspire into one another delusional speech and leave them to that which they invent. I'll pull the ayah up in a moment. Yeah, this type of inspiration from a shaitan is something which we see manifest a lot today. I'll give you an example. There was a sci-fi show when I was younger, Star Trek, still quite popular, or Star Wars. And you can now join a religion from these science fiction TV shows. Literally, you can join it and you get grades and you can work your way up. Another thing today, games. This hyper immersive. People have become so engrossed in these games that they now dress up as the characters. They live like the character. They believe themselves to be that character. They go on holidays where they spend weeks and months at a time as that character. It's they have a whole town almost that they take over, that they behave as the character they're in. We have young people who now dress up as animals, as dogs and things like this. These are all manifestations of these delusional speech that make people turn make-believe into reality, and to turn reality into make-believe. God, the belief in God, the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the tales of old, as the Quraysh would have called it, the stories of the prophets have become science fiction, nonsense, mythology, based on tales from old. They have no real reality. And the thing that is not reality, sci-fi nonsense, people have made real, and they live like it's real. So absolutely, I would agree that ayah and other ayat in Quran highlight the dangers of the this type of speech, and this joining of minds between the human and the shayateen, and the human and the shayateen from the humans and the shayateen from the jinn, because this is the byproduct of it. We live in a society, I'd say, that is we don't know every society that ever lived, so Allah knows best, but I would say that what we see now in the modern day, brothers and sisters, is a very good example of a society that has been misled and guided by a shaitan for a prolonged period of time. This isn't like, it's not like, you know, only, this is decades now, if not longer, perhaps into a century, where a shaitan has been leading the elites and has been using these fabrications, these stories, to misguide mankind. And they've, look at atheism, is a prime example of the type of, you know, intricate lies and misinformation that can be born out of two devilish minds working together. Allah knows best.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, brother. May Allah bless you. Jazakallah for coming on. We're going to carry on with the other questions. So I'm going to take you off stage now, bro. But may Allah bless you for asking the question, man. Thank you. And sharing your insights as well, bro. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, so alhamdulillah. Yeah, bro, you know, I think that reminds me of a point. You know, this topic, Farooq and brother Salahuddin, you know, a couple of years ago, you know, Farooq, when we first met and we were discussing this topic, initially when we started speaking about it, there was this whole thing, okay, this is conspiracy, this is this is that. But a lot of what you've been saying, both of you have been saying, is from the Quran and the Sunnah. We're not talking about conspiracy. All we're doing is we're saying, look, what's mentioned is what's taking place out there in the real world today. And it's not only happening today, but it's been happening decade after decade, century after century, because the tricks and the plots and the plans of shaitan have always been the same. The same strategy, just different guises. So we're just outlining the obvious. It's unfortunate that the Muslims, us Muslims, haven't spoken about this enough, you know, and unfortunately have become quite secular and liberal in our approach to these metaphysical realities. Let's be honest. You know, we okay, yeah, the jinn exists. Here is protection for the jinn. We'll read the, as Sheikh Fahd was mentioning this earlier, we'll read Ayatul Kursi, we'll read the 3 calls, we'll, you know, do dhikr, etc. But it's not like it's not real for us, because the jinn and the unseen is not real for most of us. And
Yeah.
we can't blame us fully for that. It's the environment that we live in, the zeitgeist, the materialism, the secularism, the naturalism, which has governed society for so long. It has an impact on even Muslims. But I think that one of the beautiful things about this topic and us engaging in it now is that it's actually, like Abu Salahuddin said, it boosts your own iman.
Wallah.
Because you are seeing the realities and are witnessing the realities that Allah has spoken about, that the Prophet, peace be upon him, spoke about. It's a gift from Allah that we are able to appreciate and see these things in front of our eyes. Yes, the challenge is that we help our Muslim brothers and sisters see and interpret this stuff in the right way. Because it's very easy to go off track and go down rabbit holes and be misled by the current narratives and all of that type of stuff. So this is very real stuff. This is not, you know, sensationalizing and conspiracy talk anymore, you know? So it's, but at the same time, we don't want you to get afraid or worried about this stuff and go down rabbit holes. Just, there's a balanced way of looking at this. And, you know, and if anything, it's an opportunity to prepare for things that are to come. Because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that before the time of Dajjal, there's going to be a time of deception. There's going to be deceptive people. There's going to be liars. There's going to be facade. So many things are going to happen. We probably are witnessing some of that stuff at the moment. So I just wanted to put that out there. Another question on the
Yeah,
screen,
can I
brothers.
just quickly interject there,
Yes,
just
yes.
add something into that? And like you say, there's this kind of like, I think there's some fear amongst some Muslims of being like labeled, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. When I first got into this, the question I asked myself was, does Islam accept the fact or the possibility that conspiracies exist? And it does. I can't remember exactly where in the Quran, but there's a verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala essentially talks about najwa, secret councils, and that when they take place, they are against the believers and they're essentially for the benefit of the shayateen.
Yeah.
So we know any time where there is potentially a group of people that they are working against the revealed religion, the way that God has revealed to humanity, but they're doing it in a secret manner, whether that is 5 of them, 10 of them, or if they're doing it locked away in a room, that's a conspiracy. So we have to understand, and this is the important thing, you said this, Imran, and this is something I always say this. We have access to the most powerful antidote to the poison that has been interjected into humanity from the shayateen.
Yeah.
And that is divine revelation. And that is with the manifestation of the Quran today. And this is one of the beautiful things about the Quran. The brother previously mentioned about in Surah, I think it's Surah Anam, where he said about this kind of like, are there elite that are having these conversations with the shayateen?
Mm-hmm.
From what I read from the Quran about the shaitan, and I'm talking specifically about Iblis, I don't think Iblis would even, he would sit beneath himself to sit with some of these government leaders if we see that attitude that Iblis had against Adam alayhi salatu salam. But he may send some of his minions to sit with presidents, prime ministers, wizards, warlocks, the likes of the Epsteins and people like that, and conspire against the believers and against humanity. Because this is something I think, and you said it yourself, Brother Farouk, the Quran explicitly calls Iblis an open enemy. An open enemy. You have to treat this as though you are in a war. You are in a spiritual, metaphysical war against this entity that will have no mercy for you. It will strike at you, as Iblis says, he will strike at you from every angle, above, below, from left and to the right. And he will do it from corrupting your inner nature, which is to worship God, or he will corrupt it by your misunderstanding of the divine revelation. We see people today worshiping the creation of God as though they are God. And explicitly, those creation, when they came, said that they were not God.
Yep.
But yeah, they worshiped them as God. So at the same time, like you say, it's like mention of Iblis, the shayateen, the Jinn, immediately brings on this fear. I've been investigating into this, I would say, for nearly over 33 years. I can honestly say in the last 33 years, I only can say I've had really 4 experiences with the Jinn in 33 years, nearly enough 32 years now. And the most recent one was one of the podcasts that myself and Brother Imran had, but that's another story. But the point is, don't fret about it. Don't get upset about it, because that's partly where they play on the mind. Because it's also the greatest weapon Iblis has against you is the psychological attack that they wage, that you begin to give up hope of God. But it says it clearly in Surah Yusuf, only those who disbelieve give up the hope of God.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. It's clear to see, subhanAllah.
May Allah protect us, bro.
I mean,
MashaAllah. Wise words. What's this one on the screen, brother?
Read the question on the screen. I'm just having a bit of signal dropout. But if you want to read the question and then
go on in.
Want to give it,
So we got
interesting.
Yeah, we got Fireseg 2180. He's back again. Welcome. What do you believe is the reason for abductions, testing on humans, and supposed extractions from men and women for hybrid programs, or to help their species as they've gone infertile? I think this is all speculation. In terms of like, what does the Quran say or the Sunnah say? The Prophet said, warned us. He said to bring your children in, and in one riwayah, as our brother Imran rightly says, bring your animals in before sunset, for that is the time in which the jinn spread out and they kidnap. So what we know from the abduction story in the time of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh, from the great companion, his name was Umar, may Allah bless him, and he was the one of the leaders after the Prophet, peace be upon him, who led the Muslim Ummah, who led the Muslims. He, in his time, just I'm speaking for the non-Muslims, I remember reading a comment where sometimes I use too much Islamic technical wording. So effectively, in his time, a man was taken and he was enslaved by them. So from what we can tell from that hadith and from what the Prophet, peace be upon him, told us to bring your children in, it's because they kidnapped them to enslave them. So that's generally the gist of why they do kidnappings. Now, some of the stories, the modern day stories, we've heard that they have been experimenting on human beings, which I don't have an issue with. And whether or not it's for a hybridization program because they've weakened their genetics and they're unable to reproduce, Allah knows best. All of that is conjecture. It's all hearsay. These are theories that have been put forward. Do they take sperm? Absolutely. This is well known. Do they copulate with human beings? Absolutely. This is well known. The Muslim scholars have discussed this at length. Whether or not a man, a human being and a jinn being can copulate. Most of the scholars agree that they can. And can they bear children? Again, many scholars believe that they can bear children, and they brought evidence from the Quran for that, so on and so forth. But as to the nature of why they abduct or why they're taking sperm samples, Allah knows best. I couldn't tell you, and it is likely that there's some misinformation being pumped into some of these stories, and even if it did turn out to be true, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't be like, whoa, no, this is way beyond. It's just there's so much that goes with the abduction cases over the last sort of 40, 50 years where stories have been manipulated, where ideas have been presented into the community and taken at face value to be true. And we can't be sure or not whether they are. So until we get some definitive knowledge, I think there is a lot of conjecture. But what we know from Revelation, you asked us, what do we believe? From an Islamic perspective, from a belief, not what I think or what I think might be, but from a belief aspect, from what we can tell, it's they enslave people and otherwise. So Allah knows best.
Yeah,
I think as well,
absolutely.
it's probably maybe even just on a very basic level, it's about causing confusion. It's about misunderstanding within society. I mean, if you look at people like Travis Walton, that like whole followings have gotten behind people like this. Whitley Strieber, that tries to talk about is the most wonderful experience ever, basically being raped by a female jinn. All right, if that's how you get your jollies, good luck to you, mate. That's not how I don't get mine. But the point is, if you look at the confusion, the misunderstanding, the hearsay and rumor that it creates amongst people. And I think that's what we forget. That's one of the aspects of Iblis: confusion, misunderstanding, and weaving these into society. So even if, and I always say it like this, if they can get one person to give up the belief in God and start believing ETs and extraterrestrials, job's done. Job's done. And that is the whole point that we forget. It's about bringing people away from the realization that God exists, God created us, God created a system for us to which to live by, and the acknowledgement of the one who sent it, which is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You can get them away from that to believe in X, Y, Z, to believe in the light bulb as their God. You've done your job. And that's what the Shayateen really is doing.
It's throughout the Quran. It says, don't let a shaitan deceive you. O son of Adam, don't let shaitan deceive you. O son of Adam, he is an enemy to you, to take him and treat him as an enemy, as you mentioned earlier. This is throughout the Quran. So all of it, like you said, is deception, it's a ploy, and they want to make benefit of us and utilize us and abuse us. You know, we are the lower of the races in their mind. We are beneath them. So
Yeah, and you know these abduction stories, and I think the deception element needs to be kept in mind, brothers and sisters. Don't take the stories wholesale. You know, they would do. You read Valet and Kill. There is absurdity in these experiences. There is
yeah,
so much absurdity in these experiences that it's not. What the conclusion one comes to is that it's not the experience itself that's supposed to be understood, because it's nonsense a lot of the time, some of the stuff that happens, but it's the impact that it has on the people, right? So take these abductions and hybridization. Yes, okay, so there's an element from the Jinn hypotheses. Can there be copulation? I'll get to that in a second. Farouk already mentioned it, it can. But as far as the modern narrative of abduction and hybridization, we don't know what's true and what's not. Maybe some of this is just the illusion or the story that's been created, the narrative that these shayateen are creating within the minds of these people to make them believe something about them, that they seeded us. So this was how they did it. They copulated before in the past. Now they want to help us evolve to the next stage. So now they're doing it again. Maybe something strange like that, right? So don't believe these stories wholesale. As far as, and I think Farouk, it's important to mention this, guys, as well, that because I know some people can get carried away with this. This knowledge maybe hasn't been mainstream for a very long time. So yeah, we have to be responsible with it as well. If you look at it from the perspective of our history, many of the Orthodox Sunni scholars acknowledged, at least that from a metaphysical standpoint, that it was a possibility that the jinn and humans can have relations. Okay. And even some of them said have children. However, from a legal perspective, and this is where I want you guys to maybe chime in a bit more, from a legal perspective, majority of them said that it was makruh, disliked, or prohibited outright. So keep that in mind. Don't get any ideas, yeah? Because I know, and you know, this is another very interesting thing about the parallel between AI and the NHI is even in AI now they got, you know, AI girlfriends and AI, you know, and people are having relationships with these things, and some are even divorcing their wives. One man divorced his wife and then commits suicide. These are real cases, right? They're having real illicit relationships with these bots. So yeah, don't get any ideas. The point is, it's not something that's recommended. It's something discouraged, disliked, prohibited, and there's good reasons for it. We can get into it if someone asks a question later on. But anything else you want to add on that, Farouk, bro? Because obviously we need to be responsible with this type of stuff. If you're mentioning this stuff, then you know you need to caveat it properly so people don't get the full picture.
who is that aimed at, brother?
Farouk,
You
you
or
Farouk.
so, yeah, anyone.
Go on, re-ask the question. Sorry, I was reading Sarim's question when you said it.
Yeah, I was just saying that we need to be responsible, you know. So
Yes.
anything else you want to say in regards to this whole jinn?
Yeah, I will add this in. Even being that is quite a contentious topic, the abduction topic. We've had when we've presented some of our findings, and by the way, I don't think there's a single theory that as IREP have came with that is brand new, that we're the first people to say it and bring it publicly. I don't think that there's anything yet. We may have found some really interesting links that nobody's found before, but it's based on other people's research. Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he writes about it, about human and jinn relationships. So does Dr. Umar al-Ashqar, much more a contemporary scholar, you know, from the 70s and 80s. He looked into it in his book, The World of Jinn and Devils. He discusses it briefly. You know, Suyuti, he wrote in depth about this topic. So it's not nothing new. It's just like you said, these are, I think, you know, quite contentious, but I would say even just delving into the conspiracy world, once you kind of see the world for its reality and for want of a better phrase, broke from the matrix. And once you do though, once you kind of see the reality of the world and how it's being operated and ran by and who by, you don't need to do much more digging, but it becomes habitual. And I've witnessed it myself with a brother I know who he dug too deep, and it led to his leaving Islam. But it wasn't the information so much as the filter that he had. He didn't have a filter. He didn't have knowledge, and he had too much information, and it, you know, discombobulated his mind, and it made him question a lot of things, and he lost his way. Some people will be rejoicing at hearing that, but reality is that digging so deep and being so suspicious of everything isn't the way of the Muslims. As a Muslim, as a human being in general, yeah, we have to have some level of trust for the people around us. I've seen a UFC fighter who thinks that his mother has been replaced by an alien or a clone. Right, I've seen it, and this he used to be a world champion, and now he thinks his mother's a clone. You know, there's people, you can really lose your mind because you've lost trust of everything, and this is one of the portents of the hour. The Prophet ﷺ said, "When trust is lost, wait for the hour," and it's a very vague statement. What does it mean when trust is lost? Wait for the hour. But the scholars discussed it, and in their times, if you go back, to the old days, they used to think it was in business, or some of them said when there's no trust in the leadership, they used to think, you know, if the leaderships become corrupt and you can't trust them, wait for the hour then. But if they lived in our times, they would see the real depth and scope of such a statement of the Prophet ﷺ, to the point now that you can barely watch a video without questioning its veracity, whether it's true or not. Trust has truly been lost at every level. You can't trust sending your children to school because they come back corrupted. You can't trust going to work and saying the wrong thing, or telling people how you believe or what you truly believe. Why? Because it can cost you your job, and it can cost you your children. Your children can be dragged out from the home and put into foster care because you don't have the belief that everybody else thinks that you should have, right? There's a lot of things that have been taken away and you can't trust anymore. And that's where we are now. And especially in these sort of things, you can't trust everything you say. That's why the anchor point for humanity was and always will be the Quran, as understood by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No matter how tumultuous the seas get and how great the tempest is of time that we live in, of confusion, of mistrust and evil, you will always have that anchor point. Just like the ark was the anchor point for Nuh alayhi salam, just like the fire was cool for Ibrahim alayhi salam, just like the sea was parted and the seabed was dried for Musa alayhi salam, our version of that is Quran and it is Sunnah. And people don't realize the greatness of the Quran and how perfect it is as a vessel of protection for mankind. Right? Back then it was great miracles that protected the ummah of the previous prophets, but our great miracle is the Quran, and it is divine inspiration. It will last to the end of time, so use it for that reason. That's why when we're sitting here together, brothers, what we trying to go to, we try to bring you Quran, we try to tell you what the Quran says. Why? Because it presents to us definite information and reality about these things and how they operate. And this is what you should use as your filter for all information, but in particular, these sort of conspiratorial and unusual phenomena like, you know, the Jinn and all these other things. That's why these programs, whenever we hear something come out, me, Imran, and brother Abu Salahuddin, what do? We take what they say and we look at what it says in Quran and Sunnah first. And we say, oh, well, there's 4 or 5 things that guy said that matches with what the Prophet Muhammad said all them years ago. So we use that to gauge whether there's any credibility to what he says. Absolutely, what this guy's saying, it makes sense. Why? Because it doesn't contradict and it confirms what we have. You know, so subhanallah.
Just to add into that as well, I would say, and I think the way that society has been shaped is kind of like truth is subjective. And we don't say that as Muslims. We say the Quran is absolute truth. It's not subjective. It's absolute truth. And it is a furqan, as a criteria by which we judge everything else. So one of the things the Quran says, if information is brought to you, verify it, investigate into it, ask questions. But it's not just about asking for the sake of asking. It's about asking the right questions to get the right answers. And that's something that's very, very important today as well. So, you know, ask them questions, but make sure you're using it, the Quran, as your kind of foundational basis by how you extrapolate, number one, how to ask, what to ask, and what particular answers that you are particularly looking for. And like I say, as long as you keep the Quran as your anchor into reality, essentially you will not go astray. It's where the problem, and this is where sometimes where you need to understand and even trust in people with their knowledge of the Quran. You have to be careful of things like the mutashabihat, the ambiguous verses, where a lot of people get into that. But then the Quran then tells you explicitly, God tells you that only those with a disease in their heart go into things like the mutashabihat.
Yeah.
The ambiguous, where there's not a clear definition, whether it be from God himself or from the Prophet Muhammad. So already, if I've got people telling me, well, Yasin means this, you could say there's a potentiality, but it's not an absolute. But when someone says absolutely, this is what it means, the Quran's already told me there's a disease in that person's heart. I don't need to listen to them.
Spot on, brother.
Yeah, so let me just tell you what the situation is. Alhamdulillah, we've got loads of questions. So we need to keep them shorter now, inshallah, just so we can get through everyone's questions. I don't want to leave anyone's out. I'm going to let you guys tackle the one on the screen. I'm going to go through the questions, see if there's any double ups, like if there's any repeat questions, and start picking out the ones that are not, inshallah. So yeah, and brothers and sisters watching, keep sharing, because we want to try get some of our non-Muslim brothers and sisters in humanity on the show as well. Get them to come on, watch, share their ideas, share their opinions, have a discussion with them. Keep sharing as well. And yeah, you guys tackle the one on the screen. I'm gonna keep looking through, sifting.
Go on, you go first. You go first.
Jazakallah khairan for your efforts. General question: do you think impending disclosure is just nonsense or something more nefarious behind the scenes? Yeah, I think ultimately there is more of a generational aim. There's a generational end game, which is the establishment as these extraterrestrial beings, as the creators of humanity, and essentially establishing the worship of them. And the way that they have to do that is what I would call historical authenticity, i.e. your ancestors did it back then, we've come back again, we're here to bring you and uplift you to the next level of spiritual, upliftment. We're here to connect you with the great galaxy of universal planets and all of that kind of Star Trek rubbish. Yeah, that's the end game. It's essentially to do and bring you to the worship of these entities, which is the Jinn. That's all it is.
Jazakallah khair, bro. So another question: aren't Jinn extraterrestrials, as they can fly in the heavens sky? According to Surah Jinn, extraterrestrial means beings outside Earth atmosphere.
Number one, I think
this is more of a based on.
I think number one, we're using wordage here, and I think this is one of the problems I have. Is that when we try to explain concepts and ideas in the Quran, English is not a very good language to try and explain those concepts. But needless to say, the Jinn are not extraterrestrial. They are very, if anything was close to the idea of the Jinn, I think was ultra-terrestrial, crypto-terrestrial. They are present here on Earth. As far as we know, there's nothing definitive in the Quran or the Sunnah. They originate from Earth. They are Earth beings. They seem to have had the ability at one time to go beyond the atmosphere of Earth, but with the advent of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the evil amongst them, and we can say the evil, we don't know the rest of them, they are now limited to planet Earth, it seems.
Allah knows best,
yeah. And this, the way we phrase things sometimes gives too much credence to a view. For example, if you say if you say that the Jinn are extraterrestrial, what you're indirectly suggesting is, or what we may be doing is, that the extraterrestrials are real. That's a very definitive thing. So we're trying to explain the Jinn via extraterrestrials. That's what almost comes across. Instead, we should say the other way around, based on the Jinn hypothesis, that extraterrestrials are the Jinn. If anything, that's at least what's going on currently. Farouk, anything you want to add, bro, before we move on?
Yeah, I wanted just to mention, for the sake of, and may Allah bless you, Sheikh Abu Salahuddin, but there is a difference of opinion. Some of the scholars said it was ended after the advent of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They no longer found a way up through the heavens to listen, but it doesn't necessitate that they can't travel through space. It just means that particular method of sneaking to listen to the angels, and again, the exact nature of that what I'm just for our viewers who may not know what we're discussing here, it's mentioned in Surah Safat and also in Surah Al-Jinn, but it mentions how they traveled through space, how they used to travel up through the heavens. It doesn't say space, it says up through the heavens. When we refer to the heavens in the Quran, when Allah refers to the heavens, the heavens are designated as such. One, the lowest and the smallest of them is Sama ad-Dunya. That is what Allah has adorned with stars. So when you look up and you see all these stars, and our astrophysicists calculate that they're 20 something billion light years away, some of these stars, that all is encompassed within a Sama ad-Dunya, the smallest and lowest heaven, the heaven of the dunya, the heaven of the earth. Yeah. So our planet in this universe is Sama ad-Dunya, the lowest heaven. And there are 7 heavens as mentioned in the Quran. Yeah. So the jinn, they used to seek a way through the heavens and that which is in between them. So you have the 7 heavens, and then what's between them? What is between them? We don't have definitive knowledge on that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept that out of the purview of mankind. So again, this could be huge pieces of space. It could be something completely foreign to the idea of humanity, right? But these shayateen, these marid, they used to travel up through them to sneak a listen to the gathering of the angels when they would listen to the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It says here in chapter Jinn, and we have sought to reach the heaven, but we found it filled with stern guards and flaming fires. And verily, we used to sit there in his stations to steal a hearing, but any who listens now will find a flaming fire watching him in ambush. So in that time, some of the scholars said it was specific to the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So during that time when revelation was coming down, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala closed off the heavens during that time to protect any and to not allow any added or subtracted information, that there was nothing coming down to the soothsayers, and all those avenues were closed, and that they reopened after the Quran had been completed and the Prophet's mission was complete. Now we have a preserved Quran on earth. They are allowed to open again. Some said it remained closed, and now that they listen to the clouds, because the Prophet said in the hadith that they go up into the clouds and they listen to the conversation of the angels in the clouds. So some said that that was specific to the time of the Prophet, that during his time they could only listen to the clouds, and thereafter so on. So there is a wide variety of what it is. The purpose, though, of mentioning these things is for us to understand that the nature of their existence is different than ours, and the information that they get and the great evil that they're willing to do is available to them, and to travel through the heavens is a possibility for them. And I would go one step further, and this isn't mentioned specifically in the Quran or the Sunnah, but I would say it's not a stretch of the imagination to assume that they have visited other places. Why? Because Sheikh Omar al-Ashqar, he mentions this. He says that one of the abilities of the jinn is that they reach space before mankind. In the ancient past, the jinn used to ascend to places high up into the heavens, where they would try to eavesdrop on the news of the heavens and find out events before they happened. And then he brings a hadith from the Messenger of Allah, when Allah decrees a matter from the heavens, the angels beat their wings in submission to what he says, with a sound like a chain beating on a rock. Then when fear is banished from the angels' hearts, they say, what is it that your Lord has decreed? They say the truth, and he is the most high, the most great. So those who are trying to eavesdrop hear this. And those who are trying to eavesdrop are standing on top of one another like this. Sufyan, who's narrating this hadith, who's narrating this story, he said that they gather on top of each other like fingers, if you were to link them together. And then he said, and he hears a word and he passes it to the one who is beneath him, who passes it on in turn, and until it reaches the lips of the sorcerer or the soothsayer. So that is the method of which they pass this information now. But it's well known that when you speak to the people who converse with and discuss things with the jinn, that they have an affinity to the planets that are out there. They visit these planets and they're able to travel to them, much like we're able to put let's say we have drones on Mars and on the moon and things like this. The shayateen work were space traveling, spacefaring nation far before our time. So for them to position themselves as aliens or to claim that they're from another planet, there isn't an issue for that for us. Why? Because they could bring some proof to show that they've been to Mars, or they could bring some proof to show that they visited, for example, a planet in a distant star system. We don't have an issue with that. Why? Based on this ayah and these ahadith. So, and Allah knows best, of course.
And even historically, if you look at the ancient gods, they were always associated with the sky. So that motif runs throughout history, coming down from the skies, etc., which ties in with Jinn. But also to answer the question, just because they traverse space and they go up, it doesn't mean they're extraterrestrial. Just like we fly in planes sometimes, it doesn't make us extraterrestrial after we've been on a plane. So I don't think it's the correct way to refer to them. Next question. Vatican exorcist Rossetti was removed from his position for stating that UFOs are demons. A claim now being echoed by J.D. Vince, I think, and Tucker Carlson. Why is the Vatican so hesitant to address this? Abu Salah, let's
Well,
start
the
with you.
Vatican has really, I mean, they issued it a few years ago where they issued a proclamation where they said that belief in extraterrestrial life was not incompatible. But then again, I have to say it was predominantly, it was the Catholic Church. There's nothing to say about Protestants or anybody else. So as far as the Vatican is concerned, yeah, they say that they can have a belief in extraterrestrials. And I think what the problem is with the Vatican is because obviously as Muslims, we say that for the knowledge that has been passed on in the Quran, there are 3 sentient creations on earth. The angels that come to earth frequently, there is humanity that can choose right and wrong, and then there is the jinn that can choose right and wrong. In Christianity, essentially, it's just humans and angels, because even demons, according to them, are fallen angels. So I think they maybe they're a little bit stuck there, where we as Muslims can give a more of a comprehensive answer to this. But yeah, the Vatican already issued a decree. They came out a couple of years ago and said belief in extraterrestrial life is not incompatible with the beliefs of the Vatican and the various dictates that they've made over the centuries. Yeah, so they've actually said it's compatible.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, Farouk, you want to touch on it as well, bro? Or do you want to take
No,
the
I
next
think it
one?
was a concise answer. I'd also say that perhaps the reason why they've fired that person, and it's to me just speculating based on what we've just heard, yeah, I think why it's because they've already got an internal dossier, or perhaps a secret document. I don't know what you would have classified document from the church, wherever church it might be, that guy worked for. Because again, like you said, it don't say, does it? Don't say if he was from the Vatican. Was he from the Vatican? What did it say? The question's gone, bro.
From the Vatican.
It was the Vatican. Okay.
Yeah, he was from the Vatican.
Yeah. So if he was from the Vatican and he was fired, I would assume that they've got an internal memo that's told them what you respond, and he's gone against that. He's been definitive. He said that these are demons, and he hasn't towed the line. So they've clearly, got an internal position they've taken, and he's gone against that. To what reason was he sacked? Was it because he took a very hard stance and said, no, UFOs are demons, clear cut done? Or was it that he didn't give a bit more of a, nuanced answer where he allowed for some to be that and some to be good? Again, I think there's something to be learned from that. But I think the main crux of it is that he's gone against the internal position of the church, and that's why he's lost his job. So, and others coming out, like, it's not a new thing. Many people, even in the past, have said from amongst the church, who have said that these things are clearly demons. Jacques Vallée, he's got a great little anecdote. He showed, I believe it was a computer chip that he's working on, to one of his priests back in the day, in the 60s or whatever, and he said, this is the devil. He said, this is from the devil. Like he looked at it, and I think he held it in his hand, and he just got the vibe. He said, this thing is devilish. And if it is the case that this technology that we use today had some of its origins, from craft that were recovered, you can see that sometimes the fitra, the natural position of a person who, regardless of the nature of his belief, you know, he's a man who believes in the prophets, right? And he believes in God, and he may have a warped view of who God is. But he had that intuition, that firasa, that vision that this thing was evil. And we even had that among the Muslim scholars. There was one sheikh who was he was a great scholar, may Allah bless him. He was shown the mobile phone, or not the mobile phone, the telephone back in the day.
It was Sheikh bin Baz who was shown the radio.
Oh, okay. I heard there was another sheikh, and I think it was Sheikh, not Sheikh Muhammad. What was his name? Sheikh Shinqiti, one of the early Shinqitis, it may have been. You know, from the 1920s, maybe. Allah knows best. But the early telephone, he was shown it, and he claimed that this is not a human being speaking to me; it's a devil. And you know, when I first became Muslim, I heard this position. I was like, "This is ignorance." You know, the guy don't know what he's talking about. As I've got older and I've learned more, I kind of like respect the intuition of the sheikh, you know, but Allah knows best. Yeah, it might have been Sheikh bin Baz even as well about the radio, but subhanallah, the people of knowledge, you know, they have this intuition to truth. Subhanallah.
You know what's interesting, bro? It's coming from an intuitive place, not a place of you know, where you've been pre-framed, right? So if we look at these things because we have this whole information about, okay, what we've been taught, this is this works like this, is based on this tech, and the wire, you know, all the electronics work like this. He was coming from a very intuitive place, like he didn't know what it was, came across it first time. So then maybe there's something to it, you know, that type of intuition is also, subhanAllah. So there's a question, there is a lot of focus on UAP, but what's your opinion on the less popular topic of USOs?
I will interject there. I think that this is just USO is a subcategory of UAP. UAP now, it is unidentified anomalous phenomena which can occur in the sea, and a USO is a subcategory of it, unidentified submerged object. So it's just a nomenclature, I believe. Is that the right thing? Yeah. It's just a name or a way of categorizing something. But so definitely, I think that because of the breadth of technology we have in the ocean, that Britain, Europe, America, Russia, China, and other nations of the earth, because of how complex and convoluted their arrays are that they have on the ocean floor, that perhaps even some more sophisticated than that float through the center of the ocean and are, you know, almost invisible to see, you know, you can't detect them, that are detecting they don't want any of this technology to be revealed to one another, and they don't want anyone to know the capabilities of our military prowess in the oceans. Space is a different case, right? There's so much more time and effort and money that we think is being spent in space, which makes us think, well, why aren't we spending it in the ocean? I saw one of our, mashallah, shuyukh in the chat a few days ago. He mentioned this. He said, we only spend this much on the National Oceanic, NOA, right? And he said, we only spend so many millions on this, but we spend billions on space. The thing is, space is a domain that's open, right? And nobody has conquered it completely yet. There's nobody who's created that technology which completely dominates space yet. So they're all working on it. But each of them has a domain on the ocean. And so it's not open to the privy of the regular human being. So those let's say those companies and those military, what's the right word, brothers? Not companies, but, you know, these endeavors, these research and development companies that have dominion in the ocean, they don't want that to come out. So maybe the general public spending looks very low, but in the private sector, it's massive, absolutely massive. And it has been for a very, very long time. And there's massive companies here in the UK that are constantly developing oceanic technology. So that's why you're not seeing it. There's no real investment in the public sphere, but in the private sphere, it's huge. So that's why there's less information about it, because there's more to lose. And I think that there's greater secrecy surrounding our oceans than there is the space, because there's just more to lose, especially for your enemy to find out exactly what technologies you have and what detecting arrays and that you have and what capabilities you have. And again, we're talking about like technology that people know about. There's going to be things we don't know about. There's going to be, we use a mobile phone that uses a digital connection, that uses a radio frequency. They may be using something beyond the regular frequency in these programs, things that are using quantum frequencies that are beyond our the general public's knowledge, let alone understanding, let alone knowledge at this point, that they're using to communicate undersea. So we kind of, that's why I think there's not that much. Sorry, I know I've gone a bit long-winded on that answer, but it is a very interesting.
You gave a different perspective on it, mashallah. Not what I was expecting, but it's important nevertheless. But Abu Salam, maybe you want to come in on from the angle of, okay, what about the link between the jinn and water and USOs? Is there something there?
I think it's interesting. It does seem to be this intimate link between the jinn and water, like you find. I know there was, I think it's the 411 cases in America. When a lot of these people go missing, it usually is close to bodies of water. I find that very interesting. I know that there is a narration that talks about the most evil of the jinn were locked up and thrown into the sea. And it's interesting because we were speaking about this the other day of how that now is kind of permeating through popular culture. So you had a guy called H.P. Lovecraft that produced a whole Gothic horror genre that's called the Lovecraftian genre. And he had a particular main character called Cthulhu. And Cthulhu was like this alien entity that existed billions of years, that is entrapped in the ocean, that has like kind of like a secret cabal of worshippers that are eagerly awaiting the release of Cthulhu so that they can worship him as the true god of which he is. So it seems to be something that is there within Islam. And I think also adding as well to what Brother Farouk mentioned is that the oceans are the one untapped resource for minerals and precious resources, essentially, that the Western civilization really does need. So, you know, what is at the bottom of the ocean? I mean, it's interesting to note now that one of the things that a lot of Western companies need is the type of steel and iron that they're looking for is stuff that hasn't been affected by nuclear detonation since World War II. So a lot of ships that were sunk during World War II, they literally are salvaging them from the ocean floors, melting down the metals, and then using it because it hasn't been affected by radiation fallout from Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the many nuclear detonations that we've done since 1944.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, bro.
Yeah,
it's worth. See, there's a lot to dig into. I've never
just
to
to kind of like to add into what you were saying, Farouk, like, you know, the kind of oceanographic like scanning. We now have the technology that we could find a sock lost on Mars better than we could on the ocean bottom.
So I would say this. So they say. So they say.
So they say.
Yeah, so they say. I think that there's a reason there's a lot of secrecy about the oceans, and it does link back to, as you mentioned, brother, the existence of the jinn in the oceans. I think why Courtard and other people have pushed, but not pushed that much, not compared to other things. The USO aspect is because there's a lot of fruit there. And they don't want you near the orchard, so they're cutting it down. If you want to talk, speak about space, because you can look up, people can see that. But to get the information in the ocean, you have to have technology. I can see what's flying around my house, brothers and sisters. I can see even with you know, certain technology, like a very sophisticated telescope. I can see, you know, the other planets, but I can't see in the ocean. So this is something that they're keeping really under wraps, and and it's no surprise to me, to be honest. And I think that's where
to add into that, recently, kind of like the deep dive that we did on Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day, and I think Jesse Michaels did a whole program, you know, saying that he had been approached and certain information.
I haven't seen that yet. I've got to see that, bruv.
Yeah. But there is a film director I will mention that I think he's also got information, and nobody talks about a kind of groundbreaking film he did that I think has got a lot of truth in it, and that's James Cameron's The Abyss. Because
Yeah.
where did the aliens come from? The ocean.
The ocean, mate. Yeah. Very interesting.
And we're not doing like the Jinn or the gaps thing here, guys, just so everyone knows. Like, oh, there's this whole thing about USOs, and now the Muslims are jumping on the water and trying to inject some Jinn into the water. This is not the case. This is not an after the fact type of response. Go before 2017, go before 1947, go all the way back over 1400 years. And within our tradition, there is a very clear link to the Jinn and the water. In the Quran, builders and divers, right? Iblis's throne in the Hadith literature is over the water. He establishes his throne over the water. There's another narration where it doesn't go back to the Prophet ﷺ, but it goes to one of the companions, it stops at the companions, which talks about that Sulaiman alayhi salam, Prophet Solomon chained the Jinn or the shayateen in the ocean, and that near the end of time they will come back out, they'll be released or escape, and they will bring a new Quran, a new recital, a new revelation, if you like. So the links to water are very clear, and they're already there. So we're just again making the connections based on the information that's already there. And next, so there was a question about electricity and plasmas come up a few times, and I think maybe let's spend a little bit of time getting into this because we have mentioned it a few times. And I think all three of us, maybe let's start with that. Are we in agreement that we currently believe, and Allah knows best, that the Jinn are related to plasma or a plasma-based life form? Or is there any disagreements?
No, absolutely, I would agree.
I was thinking, let's make it a bit exciting. Let's get some disagreements.
Yeah.
No, I think there is so much evidence now, and like a really good example was a Grush that came out and spoke about that one of these were these plasma entities that were listed as part of the so-called extraterrestrials that have been contacted by the American government. And I think there's just going back in history, there's so much examples of quote unquote plasma entities, the Jinn manifested. I mean, one of the things that I was looking at a couple of months back, and that is what are called the plasma pictographs. So there are these common pictographs from all across the planet. They have been found in Saudi Arabia, they have been found in Europe, they have been found in Latin America, and there's some that what are commonly called the squatter man. So for a long time, people didn't understand how can you have these universal images around the globe that people separated by landmass, time, essentially must have seen the same phenomena. And it wasn't until an American specialist who kind of studies plasma that he said, well, what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing in the laboratory, is plasma in different stages. So it seems that this is one of the things that the Jinn seem to do, is they put on these fantastical displays that amazes primitive humans and even humans today. They're kind of, wow, look at this. And then they manifest as a god, and I am your god, because they can seem to do all these amazing things. So I think, yeah, definitely. And even a lot of the orbs that are being videoed around the globe. There's one I saw recently where they talk about these things interact with people. Even Lou Elizondo spoke about orbs in his own home that were shown to be intelligent and had sentience. So, yeah, I think for me, you know, unless God brings some kind of other evidence or suggestion, I think there's so much evidence to say that the Jinn are a plasma-based life form. Yeah. And it does explain a lot of folklore connected with things like fairies and iron and stuff like that. But maybe it's something for another day.
Interesting. No, maybe we'll come back around to that one. Yeah, go on, Farouk.
Yeah, I want to concur with my brother, mashallah. Look, the word plasma is a technical scientific term to describe a state of matter. Yeah. So how can that possibly link back to the Quran? That's what people are going to say, right? But in the Arabic, it's been mentioned twice also in the Arabic language, what marriage min an-nar, a marriage of nar, a mixture, or as one of the descriptions in the Arabic language, marriage can be used to describe what lightning, a thunderbolt or a lightning bolt consists of. Yeah. This is also mentioned by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, who also uses it to say that means a mixture of a thunderbolt, or what the thunderbolt is made from. Yeah. So these individuals are using what is known in their time. They didn't know what a lightning bolt was and what it consisted of, but they used that word to describe it. So they said that the jinn, and again, it has a very rich meaning, the word marriage. You'll even find it being used for the word coral and other things, right? It's one of those incredibly rich words in the Arabic language. But that's the beauty of the Quran. It allows a wider aperture to view the meaning of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing here, because of using such a rich word. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have used a much more specific word that wasn't as rich, okay? But Allah didn't. He said a marriage of nar. Anyway, so taking that on board, what is the lightning bolt made from? What is electricity? And when you break it down, we have to use modern technical terms, because those are the people who have studied lightning. It wasn't studied by the Arabs. They didn't put lightning in a bottle and contain it and study it. The alchemists knew it existed and it was a wonder for them, and they tried to understand it best they could. But in our modern days, we have a much better way and more technology and instruments to be able to understand what it is. So that's why it is a good to use that terminology, in my view. And also, there's a lot of exotic things about plasma that can be found in what is described about the jinn, which is I don't think by accident, right? Some of the exotic properties of plasma can be found in the abilities of the jinn, like plasma. If you were able to sufficiently manipulate it, you can have a quantumly coherent plasma that would effectively create very, very powerful holograms that would look almost identical to the real thing. And in some cases, if you were to even take it to the next step, you could manipulate that plasma to be like the real thing. So it'd feel like flesh. It would look like flesh. It would bleed like flesh, right? So, this is why it's when you look at some of the capabilities of the jinn, being able to shapeshift or enter into the human body, all of these things, this is what electricity in its raw form can do. And in a much more complex form, in these deeper sort of layers of what plasma can become, even hypothetically or theoretically, then you can also see the jinn having those capabilities. So hopefully that makes sense. I didn't go too mad, did I?
No, not at all, bro. Again, so obviously we're speculating here, but based on evidence, based on what's at hand, we're analyzing the data. It's not just wild speculation.
No,
this is just looking at the information and inferring to the best explanation, right? So me personally, I'm convinced purely fundamentally based on the etymology of the word marriage. You mentioned the mixing, the volatility, the energetic nature of it. It's exactly what we call plasma, almost exactly. Because plasma is a mixing of ions and electrons, because the electrons are freed from the ion. It's energetic, it's invisible. The jinn are invisible beings, unseen, hidden beings. It's just there's too much there. Like you said, some of the traits of plasma and the way it behaves, and some of the things we know about the jinn, there's too many correlations. But then again, at the end of the day, Allah knows best, right? It's just a modern interpretation. Not a wild speculation, but based on the evidence at hand, and we're inferring, and Allah knows best. There's also the idea of electromagnetic fields and plasma. So plasma is arranged, and it has a very delicate balance of these fields. And Abu Salahuddin was last week. We engaged with an individual online who was asking about fear that people feel, this immense and sudden fear that comes out of nowhere. Maybe
this sounds interesting.
It's very interesting, bro.
I missed this. The Fridays are tough for me in these summer heats, boys, man. I'm getting these early starts, these late.
I'm in meetings. I'm in meetings as well, bro. I missed the whole show yesterday, man, on X.
Yeah, but I've missed about 10, bro.
No, Farouk. This was a kind of let's just say a fellow traveler on the road who has their own YouTube channel, and posed the question, how can, when people come into contact with the phenomena, just suddenly feel fear from nowhere? So myself and Brother Imran contacted them, and we think mashallah, Brother Imran gave a pretty good explanation as to the nature of the jinn and how they have the potentiality to trigger the EMF of the brain. Essentially, they can trip the tripwire, the fear tripwire. And we just got back a very mundane, that's interesting, which, yeah, whenever you seem to come with an Islamic answer that explains the phenomena, certain people seem to they don't hear.
We're not allowed to voice. There's a young lady who helped me in Imran last year a lot to try to make inroads, and she's well connected. Couldn't get us in because of not even the interest in information. They love the information. It's just it's too dangerous. They don't want to give a platform to us, unfortunately.
Yeah, but let's be honest.
And also, as well, I would add in, and we've kind of. Sorry, go ahead, Imran.
No, I was just saying that it seems like that they're looking for sheep mentality. It's a part of the bigger disclosure narrative project, that they want people to conform. And let's be honest, it's not that we want to go out there blasé and say all random stuff and say, look, we know it all, but we're going to stick to our guns and we're going to present our reasoning and our argumentation, and we're going to do it, no holds barred, or however you say that, without any reservations. We're going to say it as it is, and I don't think many people like that. And also, there's this element of, I think Charles Upton, the brother, mentions this in a really nice way, where there's the worship of the mystery itself. People don't want to let go of the mystery. That's become an object of worship in and of itself, because they don't want it to just be explained. They want the mystery to remain, because it keeps that enchantment and it keeps that excitement in this very dry world that we live in. But anyway, back to you, Abu Salah.
That's a very good
point.
I
think as well, unfortunately, Iblis has done a real job on humanity, that anything to do with Islam, even if it's the truth, there's an automatic click. We're going to turn off. We're not going to listen. But let's look at the statistics. Let's look at facts. Let's bring scientific to it. This explains this of the nature of the phenomena. Like Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, talks about in his essay of the Jinn, about how the Jinn seem to have the ability to, cast illusions. Now, it could be that the illusion is they're tricking the EMF of the brain, or literally, as Brother Farouk is saying, they are able to create like a hard light hologram that you can literally walk over to it, touch it. But somebody, and this is an interesting thing, and then kind of bringing on from we was talking about yesterday with the skull experiment. One of the things that some of the attendees of the skull experiment noticed is that they would have these orbs of light that would appear, but it wouldn't appear to everybody in the room. And then they would say, okay, can you appear to John Smith over there? And then it would appear to John Smith, but Michael couldn't see it anymore. So it's kind of like they have these abilities. And this is the beautiful thing for me personally about Islam. Islam fills in the gaps. It explains how the phenomena, within a certain degree of understanding, we still say Allah knows best, God knows best. But from what we seem to be able to, we can explain a lot of how they can induce that sudden aspect of fear. How people can say, look, there's a craft up in the sky, and they take a picture, and guess what? There's nothing on it. It's because they tricked your brain. Ibn Taymiyyah spoke about it 700 years ago. So it's documented, it's there. And what I would say is, if you're scientifically based, put it under the scrutiny, and it seems to work out.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
I think it's very interesting. We could probably come back to that maybe in the when we get to the section of the show, which we'll do at the end, which is what you've been currently reading and any interesting things you want to share.
Inshallah.
But yeah, sorry, Farouk, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to divert the topic, but then I read the question. So if you don't mind, brothers, because you two guys are probably the two best positioned to answer the two questions we've got here, I'll go for it. I'll read them out. Two questions. Your thoughts on all the pyramids around the world. Oh, sorry. I think there's a period there. No, there's not. It's just my glasses. Your thoughts on all the pyramids around the world, especially Egypt, being built by Jinn before humans came on Earth? Also, you guys or your guys' thoughts on AI and transhumanism linking with a shaitan. So let's start with the pyramids, the global pyramid conspiracy, that all of the pyramids have a common creator. And with this brother's ideas, he thinks that perhaps they were built before human beings even came to the earth, you know. So, mashallah, I'll pass it straight to you, Abu Salahuddin. Bismillah.
I wouldn't say that the pyramids were built by the Jinn, and I think this is because I personally believe that humanity is a lot more older than we've been told to accept by the standard, you know, evolutionary that says, you know, 100,000 years ago we were half apes, half humans, and this kind of rubbish. I think there's a lot of studies that have been done. Like, say, for example, let's look at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, that goes back to 9.5, 10,000 BC. As far as they are concerned, the traditional standard narrative of human history is that we were hunter-gatherers. We should not have been able to have the ability to create a structure like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Not only that, I think it was Norman Finkel, who is a resident archaeologist and professor at the British Museum. He said something really interesting, that he spoke about like a seal that had been discovered at Göbekli Tepe. And he said, for me, as an archaeologist, as a historian, that shows civilization. It shows language. Because if you have a seal, you have to have a seal that connects with a meaning and an understanding. And that meaning and understanding has to be then shared by other people within that society. So what a lot of people are saying now is that they're talking about the Karahan Tepe civilization that encompasses Göbekli Tepe, and goes back, or it seems to go back at the end of the last ice age. What a lot of people like Andrew Collins have said is that there was a civilization before the last ice age that existed. Now, there is a really good author by the name, his name is Michael Cremo, and he wrote a book called Forbidden Archaeology. And he shows all of these anomalies that have appeared within the structure, fossil structures, that essentially show civilization and humanity existing, going back not just a couple of a couple of million years. There's one that he talks about. There are these spheres. I think they're called the calendry spheres, but they were found in South Africa. These things are perfect spheres with patterns on. They're going back a couple of million years. Now, some of it we could put down to the Jinn. That's a high possibility that their civilization was here. People move on, develop. I have no problem with that. But I think, like I said, the reason why things like we see the universality of pyramids across the globe is because at one time there probably was a global civilization. But because it disrupts the narrative of what's been commonly accepted through academia today, they don't want to accept it. So they kind of like, no, it has to be this, it has to be that. We cannot accept anything that goes beyond that. So like I say, I mean, there is evidence to show that there was a global civilization. Now, that global civilization seems to have gone back before the last ice age. The ice age came in and that civilization was decimated. And then we see the remnants of it. Now, what's also interesting as well about the Sphinx, and I know about the Sphinx because I was standing in front of it in December last year. Dr. Robert Schoch, who is a university professor from America. Now, what is commonly said about the Sphinx is that it was built, I believe, by the Pharaoh Amenhotep III. But yet nothing of the features are reflective of Amenhotep III. It just doesn't fit. Or it may be an earlier pharaoh, I can't remember. But what the deal breaker is for me that shows the historical antiquity going back further than it's been accepted by most Egyptologists is he spoke about the weathering that was on the Sphinx. And he said the weathering on the Sphinx goes back to at least 10,000 BC. because he said to get that kind of weathering, he said the last time that area of the Giza pyramids essentially had a lot of proliferation of rain was 10,000 BC. And he said, so he potentially even puts the Sphinx at being older than 10,000 BC. It could be even older than that. And like I said, I think what's happened, and this is what I get really upset about. Sorry if I'm going on a bit. I do apologize.
This stuff, man. This is so interesting.
Science has got a dogma to it. The same way they want to accuse us as, I would say, religion expressionist people. I don't like using that word religion because it doesn't fit Islam. But the point is, science has got a dogma that says humanity developed here, civilization was here, this was bronze, this was the Iron Age, this is modern man. I'm sorry, but what's coming out of the earth does not prove that correct. In fact, it goes beyond that. There's another example, I think it's in Indonesia, and it's called Padang Badak, and it's a pyramid that they have done studies into it, that they said that the inner structure is going back to at least 20,000 BC. So how do you explain that? And like I say, there is a pseudo-religious dogma in modern science, whether that is archaeology, whether that is, you know, all of geography that goes with it. It's there, it exists. So humanity is definitely a lot more older than we have been given the perception. And like I say, there does appear to have been at one time a global civilization. And to me, it fits in Islamically, because Adam and Hawa came to the earth. Their children would have had a common lingua franca, common language, common culture that they would have spread through the earth. And thus you would have get the commonality. How is it then that you can get the flood story, you get it in ancient Sumeria, you get it in the Abrahamic faiths, you get it in Egypt, you get it in ancient China, and you get it in Mesoamerica? So that means, to me, I understand it from an Islamic perspective, prophets, and we know the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said this, over 144,000 prophets were sent to humanity throughout human history. So some of them would have been in Europe, some of them would have been in China, some of them would have been in Mesoamerica, and they all would have come with a common message. There is one God, and you worship that God, and potentially I am his messenger, or I have come to correct the misconceptions of the corruptions you've come into. So, you know, I don't know what the ancient Chinese called God. You know, we know Allah, because that's what Allah calls himself in the Quran. You know, but God, you know, what he called himself to the ancient Icelandic people or to the ancient people of India, whatever that name was, it would have been glorified and befitting of Allah. And that's all I need to know.
Yeah. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. The second part of the question was about AI and transhumanism, brother, and it's linked to a shaitan. So we'll pass over to you, Imran.
Yeah, so briefly, I would say yes, there is definitely a link. So if you look at it from a metaphysical perspective, I would say it's quite evident. Because look, transhumanists, although within the whole sphere of transhumanism, there is some good, let's be nuanced there, like helping people walk again, helping people see again. This is good. But ultimately, if you look at some of the darker side of transhumanism, it's all about outgrowing your humanity, you know, evolving to the next stage, as some of these authors refer to it, and taking evolution into one's own hand and developing the human being beyond the human and becoming integrated with machines. And even darker aspects of it, or egotistical aspects of it, is where they want to transcend even death. They want to outgrow death. They don't want to, you know, death shouldn't be a reality for these people anymore. They want to live forever. And they believe by integrating with machines, integrating the consciousness with the machines, they can achieve this stuff. Now, this is very reminiscent, or reminds me of, you know, when Iblis, for example, comes to Adam and he says to him, you know, if you eat from this tree, eternal life is promised, as well as one of the ideas that's suggested. And that gives us a bit of an insight that this desire to live forever, which is, you know, takes place in the next life, in the hereafter, in Jannah, but they want it here and now. This is something Shaitan plays on. And it seems like he's playing on the same idea today in the 21st century with the transhumanists, you know, giving them these promises of living forever through engaging and integrating with this technology. And obviously AI is tied into this. And there's so many detrimental effects of AI as well. It's like it's the mimicry of consciousness or sentience. People are engaging with it as if it's a real person with a soul. By doing this, they're losing connection with real human beings, their own family members. There's so many detrimental effects of AI. Sure, there's some good as well, but you have to look at the dark side. There's no manual on how to use this stuff. Also, if you take into consideration the downloads, DW Pasoka has mentioned this, others have mentioned this, that these AI tech leaders and other tech leaders are receiving downloads from entities that are gifting them this technology. There seems to also be a link between the UFO, UAP phenomena and AI. Because if you look at the UFO phenomena, what you see in the sky is technology. That's what the government's after. It's the tech, is reverse engineering this technology. So it feeds into that techno-secular, greedy mindset of wanting to attain this technology. On top, furthermore, if you look at these aliens, they look very scrawny. They've atrophied. They're very skinny, big heads. Symbolically, it suggests that these beings have transcended their biological function. They don't use their bodies anymore, right? So they're shrinking, but they're using their minds. Other suggestions that these craft and these beings are integrated. There's an integration between the tech and these beings, pushing the idea of transhumanism. So these transhumanist types, these techno-secular transhumanist types, they look at this stuff and they'll look at the whole UFO UAP phenomena and see it as an archetype, as the goalpost, as this is what we want to achieve. They almost act like they're prophets or they're gods. So it all ties in together. And I believe it's Iblis and Shaitan behind all of this and enforcing this and encouraging this, at least on one level. And then obviously there are shayateen amongst the humans who are pushing these types of narratives and, making profits off of this technology. And there's a lot more we could go into. We don't have time, but hopefully that answers that to some degree. Next question, bro. Let's take the next one, because what I want to do is in about 5 minutes, we start wrapping things up with sharing some of the readings section, and then we wrap up before Maghrib, inshallah. I think that would be a good plan. So next question is it possible for the righteous amongst the jinn to interact with humans, not bad ones? I asked good ones. So just my 2 cents on it, or 10 pence on it. I think it's a possibility, but I think it's a very rare thing. It doesn't happen very often. And because if you think about such an interaction by a good believing jinn and a believing human being, I mean, if such an interaction happened, what would they share with each other? And think about all of the possible ways this interaction can lead to negative, the Muslims being misled. It's a test, because imagine you come across this entity that has all these abilities, you'll be tempted. The waswasa will be there from the negative shayateen to encourage you to ask for something which you're not supposed to ask for. So it's a very risky business, right? And as far as I know, Farooq, you mentioned that there were some interactions mentioned in the hadith literature, but they were very specific in context. It was always about guiding to goodness, guiding to Allah, and that was it, right? There wasn't anything else.
So I have the story right here, yeah? So this is in Sahih Bukhari. For those of you who don't know, this is, about as good as it gets in terms of hadith literature for authenticity. Yeah? So this is an authentic hadith, this authentic report that Umar ibn Khattab, Umar was an amazing man. But one time he was performing Hajj and he saw a man, and he asked this man, just by looking at him, he said to his companions, either he is a soothsayer or he was a soothsayer. So Umar looked at him and he knew from his look that this person was someone who used to interact with the jinn. So Umar ibn Khattab said, can you tell me something that your jinn told you something interesting that the jinn that you used to receive told you? And this is what he said. He said, one day while I was in the market, so this is man telling Umar this story, this man who used to be a soothsayer. He became Muslim, alhamdulillah. And he said, one day I was in the market and she came to me scared. So the jinn approached this man and she was scared. He had a female jinni. And she said, haven't you seen the jinn and their despair? And they were overthrown after their defeat, meaning that they lost the battle of the heavens. They were in the heavens trying to listen, and something strange happened, and they were defeated by the angels, so that they were unable to pursue going into the sky. This was what she said, and they kept following the camel riders. So his female jinn came. Have you heard the despair of the news that the jinn were overthrown in the heavens, and now all they can do is follow around the human beings? They can't travel up to listen anymore. And Umar, he said, after him reporting that story, he said he is telling the truth. He said, one day while I was sleeping near the idols, there came a man with a calf and he slaughtered it as a sacrifice to the idols. And an unseen creature shouted at him and said, and he said, and I never heard anything like this before in my life, or more harsh than this. He came, and the voice, it was just a disembodied voice. There was no, it didn't originate from a person. This was just coming in the air. He said, "Oh, you bold evildoer. An eloquent man is saying none has the right to be worshipped but Allah." And at that, the people fled and they ran away. So a man came to, so Umar is saying, yes, this story, what you told me is true. One day I was near the Kaaba. A man brought an animal to sacrifice to the idols, and a voice came booming in the sky saying, "You're an evil person. A man has come to you telling you that only Allah is worthy of worship. So why are you, essentially, why are they sacrificing to idols when Allah is one and he is the only one deserving of worship?" And Umar said, he said, when I heard this voice, I didn't want to leave till I found out where it came from. So I said, I shall not go away until I know what is behind this. Then the voice came again. "Oh, you bold evildoer, a matter of success. An eloquent man is saying none has the right to be worshipped except Allah." Then I went away, and a few days later, a man claimed that he was a prophet, and that was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he, even though at that time the message had already started before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam became took the message public, but here we have an example of a righteous jinn who was warning the people of Quraysh that the heavens have changed and the evil is ending and you need to worship Allah alone. So this was one good example of a good jinni. There are a few more as well, and quite a few of them happen with Umar, as is mentioned also in the Quran. As the jinn say themselves in Surah Al-Jinn, there are among us some who are righteous and some who are contrary, who do different than this. And we are groups having different ways. And this also means religious ways. So there are among the jinn good and there are some who are bad. The thing is, identifying a good jinn and a bad jinn for a Muslim, and I'd say even this would extend to the Christians, is, do they believe in the prophets? Do they follow the prophets? Do they believe in God as one, alone, with no partners? Do they, do and encourage good? If all of the above is true about the jinn, they would not disturb the human being. And if one comes to you purporting to be a good Muslim and please let me come in your home, and they want to get close to you and they disturb you, generally this is not a good thing, because it's not part of their culture. It's not normal for them to do that. Likewise, it's not normal for us human beings to stumble upon their abodes and their homes. And if it does happen, it's anomalous. It shouldn't happen. It's not normal. So when you ask the question about good jinn, identifying a good jinn is one who stays away from your affairs and doesn't bother you. All right? Generally. And in the very few cases where you may be traversing an area and you hear a disembodied voice and it only gives you good, then alhamdulillah. But to seek out conversation and to try to get in contact with them and saying, I want to speak to a good jinn, and doing strange things that's not from the sunnah, and it's not what the Prophet, peace be upon him, did, or what any of the prophets ever did, then this is something that you should stop doing immediately, because you're opening the door to something you don't understand. It may seem initially that it's good, but they have nefarious ideas with the human. I know for sure there was a woman, this is very early on when I became Muslim, she said that she had the angels visiting her. She became confused. She thought that these were angels, these were jinn. They were telling her, you're such a good, pious person, you don't need to observe the scarf anymore. And then it came to the point where they said, you don't need to pray anymore. And you'll find this among the so-called awliya of certain countries, where they say, no, Allah's exempted me from these things. They have exemption from matters of the Sharia. Whenever you hear of somebody who says that they're speaking to angels or to jinn and they're guiding them, stay away from them. By Allah, guidance is, you don't need any jinn or human being to be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. and to open the door to them and try to converse with them, it causes more trouble than good. May Allah bless you, brother. I'm not having a go. You know, I understand some people, they're so desperate for something amazing to happen that they say or do things that are wrong. But, you know, don't get involved and stay away from the jinn and stay away from the shaitan. May Allah bless you.
So there was a question about brother Abdullah asked about Brandon Fugel and contacting him to get imams to get on the ranch to do some ruqya potentially. So I've messaged Brandon Fugel a few times, and he does respond to the messages. We also know someone that knows Brandon Fugel. He seems like a nice guy. We're trying to get something like that to happen, but then again, the issue with that is we know that ruqya is going to most likely shut it down. If anything, it's not going to, you know, it's not going to attract the shayateen in, you know, and make stuff happen like, you know, in that case. So I don't know how useful it's going to be, but speaking to Brandon and informing him about the jinn, we have done this as well. Yes, yeah, Furqan.
If we can get that contact, I would honestly, I've spoke to Brandon a few times, but it's never gone beyond just the pleasantries of, you know, discussion. I would like to do a number of tests and research. What is it? What is it when you're doing what is it? An experiment. That's the word. Yeah. I'm getting old, boys. Yeah. I feel bad, man, because my brother, mashallah, next to me, he's handsome, much older than me, but much more handsome, much more better memory than me. I'm losing it, bro. But to do an experiment, the first one I'd like to do is to bring a cockerel to the ranch and to also bring a donkey, based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that he indicated that these two animals in particular are astute of observing malaika, angelic phenomena, and jinn, devil phenomena. So I'd like to bring them on. I'd also like to bring two types of meat. I'd like to bring meat that hasn't been slaughtered in the name of Allah, and to bring meat onto the ranch where the name of Allah has been mentioned during its slaughter, and to see if there's any deterioration between the two types of meat, right? Just based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, to also eat food and to leave food behind after mentioning of Allah after eating it, and mentioning a food where the name of Allah hasn't been mentioned while eating it. You understand what I mean? And also, I think these would provide some good research pieces, inshallah ta'ala, about the true nature of the ranch, because it is possible that there is some human activity going on as well there. Absolutely, I've no doubt that there's some satanic jinn activity for sure, because things are phasing through the mesa, coming out from the ground when it seems impossible to do so. But I also think that there's been some ritualistic things happening there. So I doubt, Imran, that they're ever going, or Abu Salahuddin, they're ever going to let us come on and start busting out Surah Baqarah.
Well, you can't have a program called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, because the next season would be the solving of Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we had some guys from Iraq. They came over from the UK. They recited some Quran, and that was it. Everything was right after that.
The ranch is dead, mate.
You know, we went back to our families, and now the farm is a nice dairy farm. We've got some big cows. We've got some Muslims coming in. We're going to do some halal dhub, and local Muslim community say they've got brilliant cows there. That's it. Solved. No problem.
I would like to see the reaction of the ranch and the phenomena on the ranch to the Quran being recited. I do think that due to the nature of Surah Al-Baqarah and the length of term of which it cleanses an area, 40 days, I'd like to see the activity after the 40 days. I think it's a worthy place. And someone like Brandon, I think that he is inquisitive enough to allow it to happen. However, because they're a group, and because of the way that Americans in particular view Muslims, I think it's a very, very low chance. It's just too dangerous.
You never know.
I think there's something else as well. I think there's something else to factor in. Remember, the farm that it was originally owned, was it by the guy who owned the aeronautical company? I can't remember his name. Bigelow. And NIDS specifically was set up to work in conjunction with the American government. Do you think that's changed? You think that's changed on the farm?
I don't. I have, and I more so than ever this year. I do think that there is 2 data streams coming out of that ranch, and I think there's one that is highly classified, and then there's the entertainment data, and I think that the 2. I think there's more that they know about it that they deliberately say, because they have very repetitive experiments. And sometimes you're thinking, why aren't you being more invasive in the mesa? Dude, you pulled out scraps from there that just do not belong in a piece of rock. And after that,
one of the best interviews.
Go on.
Sorry, one of the best interviews that took place recently was the biologist on Skinwalker Ranch.
Dude.
And he said explicitly, we have stuff on film that we cannot explain. He said we have mammals, creatures that don't fit any record in human history, but we've got it on film. Why haven't you released it?
Dude,
well.
What about the dire wolf DNA that they found? That dead cryptid that they found, I think that was one of the, I think that was an issue that they kept secret from whoever's pulling the strings. Even Brandon probably allowed it to, like, we're not going to tell them because it's a dead body. They've probably been given a specific set of rules to follow, that if you capture anything living or something like that, and the discrepancy being that this was a corpse floating in the water that was of an undescribed, like you couldn't describe what it looked like, it was too decayed. But when they put it in the lab, what did it come back at? Dire wolf DNA, bro. When the guy said, it's like, I haven't never seen this, like it's not in our data bank. And I don't think they're going to lie like that. And I'm sure that people who have access to those sort of research papers, they can go and dig around and see that that was a genuine thing that happened. I found that really fascinating. But a lot of people criticize the show, but I'm a fan, man.
I'm a bit more optimistic, I guess. I'm hopeful.
Mashallah.
Our discussion with Brandon will go somewhere, and we can make
Inshallah.
something, because they have been open to rabbis coming on and Native Americans coming on. Hopefully, let's see what happens. We'll keep working on it back end. But
their Seventh-day Adventists make.
So, guys, here's the thing: Maghrib's coming in. We could do 2 things, right? We can pray and come back and finish off, or we could finish off and then go pray. What would you?
I think it'd be better if we finish off, Akhi.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
So let's do this. Someone quickly answer in 30 seconds a question on the screen, and then
I'll do that.
wrap up on
if you don't mind, brother, I'll quickly do that. What is the need for aircrafts if Jinn can travel on its own in good speed? My simple response to this, my beautiful brother Jubair, and look, that's a very logical question. Like, dudes, why would they need to build something when they could just travel like that anyway? I think that's slightly that's a logical leap that you're making. Human beings can walk. Why did we invent the bicycle? Well, after the bicycle, why did we then make the motorcycle? After the motorcycle, why make the car? Why then redevelop the car into, aircraft? Why do we need to fly through? Well, after the aircraft, why build the submarine, or why build the, rocket ship? Ingenuity and invention for ease of travel is something that's innate to the human being. No other animal builds objects in order to make comfortable their travel. And us, like the Jinn, we have free choice, and so do the Jinn. And it is known that they invent. It's mentioned in the Quran. We mentioned it earlier on from the surah, from chapters from Surah An'am, and also it's mentioned, that they build handicrafts. And this is described by, as Allah said in the Quran, every builder and every diver. So their ability to dive doesn't just necessitate that they don't need to make something to make diving easier for themselves, nor that their ability to fly or to have wings doesn't mean that they wouldn't find it better and easier to use a type of technology. So it's just and again, I get what you're saying, but I look at how we are and look at how beneficial it was. Allah, when he subjugated the Jinn, sorry, I've made it a bit longer than it should have been, but just to put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, of the idea, when Suleiman had the Jinn subjugated to him, it was because of their abilities to build. And it's highlighted and mentioned in Quran, their ability to build basins, high platforms, and other things that are probably more advanced than we could possibly imagine. To travel instantaneously and things like that. Perhaps Suleiman alayhi salam saw things and handicrafts that the Jinn were able to build and make for him that we don't know. So if that led to Suleiman having a kingdom that will not be repeated, No matter how many UFO these guys pull down out of the sky, they're never going to get close to what Sulaiman alayhi salam had at his disposal. That's a fact. It will never happen. Yeah. But we may get some of it, right? Just if they were subjugated for their abilities to build and to make ease for Sulaiman, things that, you know, to make things easier and to make building and manufacturing easier for Sulaiman. Imagine what they're doing now, all these thousands of years later. Right. So I think that it's a good question you asked, but when you really dig deep into it, it's obvious. They're just like us. They don't want to do any more than they have to. And if they can automate anything like we want to these days, they're going to automate it. So travel, flight, space travel, I'm sure that they have technology that does blow the minds of people who are exposed to it. So Allah bless you.
Perfect, brilliant. Okay, so we're done with the Q&A section. Just going to wrap up on this last section. Anything you guys have been reading that you found interesting that you want to share? Let's start with Abu Salahuddin. Inshallah, yeah, bro. Let us know what you've been going through recently.
All right. So kind of to prepare for yesterday's deep dive we did into the skull experiment, that, you know, hopefully everybody gets an opportunity to listen back to that. So if you haven't listened to it, please do. The skull experiment literally blows out of the water this idea that, you know, these entities are from outer space. So reading this particular book, The Skull Experiment, really comprehensive book that goes into it. It's an experiment that was done to essentially prove life after death. One of the interesting, or a couple of the interesting takeaways from this particular book is these so-called spirits were very advanced in technology because they were creating or giving technical diagrams to the seance team to create technology that they could supposedly communicate with different dimensions of the dead. The other aspect that's really interesting about this is they set up a video experiment and they were filming these entities. And can you guess what these entities look like, brothers? Let's see if you can have a guess. What do you think they look like?
Let me guess, bro. They got big bug eyes. They got bulbous heads and little skinny bodies, if I'm guessing.
Yeah, your typical alien grey. So hang on, I'm going to get a picture I'm going to show you. So they actually called it Bluey. There we go. So your typical alien grey.
Just context, bro. Are these real pictures? Were they on film?
Yeah.
Like how
these are from the video, and this is the interesting thing. The so-called dead spirits were the ones who gave the video film instructions to the people and said, set it up, this is how we want you to film us. And they ended up filming this particular entity called Blue that looks like a typical alien grey. What's also interesting is that UFOs were materializing out of orbs of light and were flying around the basement room where the seances were taking place.
So you say Norwich?
No, that's the interesting thing. So
okay.
It was actually, so Skull is the name of the village, Skull Village. Who wants to take a guess where Skull Village is?
I thought it was Norwich. Go on.
It's an hour's drive from Rendlesham Forest.
No.
Yeah. Dude, I'm telling you, that's where Norwich is.
Yeah, it's just up from there.
Yeah, it's in that general vicinity. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. I wanted to go see these guys.
And we all know what happened at Rendlesham Forest. So yeah, so the Skull experiment, like I say, disproves. But let's get a little bit more evidence to disprove this idea of extraterrestrials. So the second book I'm reading at the moment is DMT Encounters. So Terence McKenna was the guy who basically developed using these cyclotronic drugs, DMT, and they were going into these realms and they were meeting these DMT entities. Can we all guess what some of these DMT entities look like, brothers? Let's see if we can have another guess. Who can guess? Alien Greys. Alien Greys. There was another term, he called them machine elves. So there was a whole load of these other entities. There's actually a really good book on it called DMT Entities that goes into really explaining the different entities that people have seen through these DMT experiments. But like I say, overwhelmingly, it comes back. the alien grey are turning up in people that are tripping off their head. So how is it extraterrestrial then? Because they seem to have the ability to traverse through the realms of the dead, and they seem to have the ability to traverse into when people are tripping as well. So last book I'm reading, and I'll give a quick explanation, is this one, History of Magic. So the reason why I'm reading this, because the more you investigate into this phenomena, you begin to find the esoteric and the occult more and more. There's a really good book. It's called Sigils of the Euphonauts. Was written by a guy called Greenfield. That he said, if you look at a lot of these early encounters from the 50s, the 60s, right up until today, there's always some kind of occult activity that's going on, either to contact these entities, or these entities are using occult means and methods to contact humans. So like I say, that's my kind of 3 books at the moment I'm reading, which is the DMT Entity Encounters, the Skull Experiment, and the History of Magic.
Brilliant. Farouk, how about yourself, bro?
Right. So my I've had a bit of a break from the direct, let's say, research of the UFO side of things, but I have spent a bit of time looking at British, the British cover-up, should we say? More looking at a bit of a paper trail, trying to find interesting tidbits of information to piece together what happens to the data after it's retrieved. There's a lot of sites that I drive by in the UK, both American and British ran RAF sites that are interesting. They've got a lot of radar arrays all over the base, and I know that there's a lot of data being gathered on UAP and UFOs, but what happens to it? What do they do with it, and how do they, because they don't want to pay for it themselves, right? Ultimately, the public, we always end up spending the money on the research. So what I wanted to do is try and find out. I've told you a little bit about this before, Imran. Trying to find out what happens, what is the UK's program? What is our reverse engineering program? And is there any information about it? And I honestly thought that due to how the classic British stiff upper lip, you know, we're never going to give up our brethren. We don't talk. We're not a leaky ship like America has, yeah, where every man, when he leaves serving his country, he becomes disgruntled and he reveals all the secrets and he's angry at them, right? Britain is not like that, okay? Britain is very good at keeping secrets, you know. But I did find a lot of information, and it's, you know, it's everywhere, but it's very well. How do I say this? It's very well
Obscured.
Obscured. Brilliant word, Akhi. Obscured. Because if you try to find who's running you, you'll always be taken to 1 or 2 sites in the UK and you'll get nowhere with it. But if you break it down, the abilities of the UFO into the sum, rather than the sum of its parts, but into its individual parts, you're able to start to see who's working on what. So I found a number of professors in the UK who work on what I would say is the British reverse engineering program. So I'm going to just read a little bit. I don't want to take too much time, but I'm just going to read a little bit of information here.
It's just Maghrib. I'm cognizant Maghrib's in.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. If you guys want to pray, if you want to pray and come back, we can carry on for another half an hour.
I would just say, yeah, I want to pray and I'm done because I need to go to the bathroom as well. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah, because you probably got travel tomorrow as well, isn't it?
Yeah. The BAE Systems, BAE is a company that's been identified by a number of individuals who've come out as whistleblowers as one of the program branches who run in the UK. That is those are our guys, but they have a number of scientists who are working on very, very unusual technologies. One of the guys' name is Dr. Mehdi Hendinjanizadeh. Hendinjanizadeh, yeah? He is a specialist who works on electronic nervous systems for crafts. You also have another Muslim who works on these meta materials. He's a specialist in meta materials. Where's his name? Professor Dr. Sajid Haq, who works on controlless flight, vehicles that fly without controls. They seemingly don't have wings in a normal fashion, but they have certain capabilities of flight. So that's what I've been looking into. So very fascinating. One day maybe we'll do a huge deep dive into all of the research I got on this.
Of course.
But yeah, because it's Maghrib, I thought I'd just share with you.
Just a quick one, Farouk. I think I've got a book for you. This one.
What's it called?
Nick Redfern, The Pyramids and the Pentagon. But it also covers the British, who reports to who, and what information they're looking for.
Oh,
I think I've got a PDF. I'll send it over to you.
You're a legend. You're a legend.
Inshallah.
So I'm sorry. I'd like to, if you would, after I go bath, if you want to carry on a bit later on, maybe, but otherwise I'm done.
I think for the first one we wrap up, bro. We've been going for about 2.5 hours. I think it's a good time to stop now. But yeah, I mean, nothing special. Just the book by Lynn Picknett, Abu Salahuddin, that you recommended to me. That's a good one I've been going through. Patrick Harper's Demonic Reality, Valets, Messengers of Deception, and a few more other bits and pieces. But anyway, brothers and sisters, may Allah bless you all. Thank you for joining, guys, and our non-Muslim friends and guests. Thank you for joining us. This is the first live. We're gonna probably do this every 2 weeks. Not every week, it may be too much because everyone's busy, everyone's doing a lot of stuff. May Allah bless the brothers. Farouk, Abu Salahuddin, you guys, taking the time out to do this as well. May Allah bless you and accept from you. So we'll do this every 2 weeks, inshallah. Obviously, you got the podcast that comes every 2 weeks. Keep watching, keep sharing. Bring your questions. So this will be a platform for you guys to bring your questions, and we'll be addressing your questions, I think, predominantly as we go through the show, because there are so many questions and we didn't get through all of them. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. May Allah bless you all, and we'll see you in about 2 weeks on the live. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Take care.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.